Get out and stay out." My father screamed, his face purple with rage. My family threw me out into a freezing blizzard for dropping out of medical school, calling me a worthless failure. They had no idea I was quietly sitting on a $50 million fortune. The very next morning, I moved into my Manhattan penthouse on Billionaires Row. 3 weeks later, they would be begging at my feet. My name is Ethan, and I am 33 years old. If you have ever been looked at by the people who share your blood and realize they only see a disappointment, I want you to listen closely. They tell you that family is supposed to be your sanctuary. But what happens when that sanctuary is a pressure cooker of conditional love? What happens when your existence is an embarrassment to their carefully curated social image? Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because you are going to want to hear exactly what happens when the family scapegoat becomes the ultimate landlord. It was exactly 3 weeks ago. I was standing on the expansive porch of a $6 million estate in the Hamptons. The snow was coming down so hard it felt like shattered glass hitting my face. But the freezing cold outside was absolutely nothing compared to the absolute ice in my father's voice. The night had started as a celebration. It was the 35th wedding anniversary for my parents, Richard and Patricia. My father, Richard, is a renowned cardiac surgeon and the chief medical officer at a major New York hospital. My mother, Patricia, is a socialite whose entire existence revolves around hosting charity galas to flaunt her wealth and assert her dominance. The grand dining room was packed with the upper echelon of East Coast society, top-tier surgeons, ruthless hedge fund managers, and massive real estate tycoons mingled under dripping crystal chandeliers. Waiters circulated with silver trays of expensive champagne and delicate appetizers. I had driven 3 hours through a brutal winter storm just to show up for them. I had spent the last 8 years in exile trying to build a bridge back to the people who raised me. I wore a simple, dark-tailored blazer, avoiding the flashy designer labels my family obsessed over. I thought maybe tonight they would finally just see me for who I am. Across the crowded room, I spotted my younger sister, Olivia. At 30 years old, she is the undisputed golden child of our family. She is a high-end dermatologist who caters exclusively to wealthy celebrities and prominent public figures. Standing right next to her was her husband, Jamal. Jamal is a 34-year-old African-American man who exudes a ruthless predatory confidence. He is a senior corporate lawyer at one of Manhattan's most vicious firms, and he wears bespoke suits that scream newly acquired wealth. They spotted me standing quietly near the edge of the room, holding a glass of club soda. Olivia's smile immediately curdled into a sneer of pure disdain. She tapped Jamal on the arm, pointing her champagne flute in my direction. They glided over to me like sharks, sensing a single drop of blood in the water. "Ethan, you actually came," Olivia said, looking me up and down as if inspecting a nasty stain on her expensive carpet. "I thought you would be too busy doing whatever it is you do now in that little apartment of yours." Jamal chuckled, adjusting his heavy gold cufflinks with a practiced arrogance. "Come on, live. Do not be hard on the guy. Coding takes time. Speaking of time, I just closed a $5 million retainer with a major tech conglomerate today. How are the little apps coming along? Ethan, are you still trying to build the next big video game? It is a TOLS platform." "Jamal," I replied, keeping my voice completely even and refusing to take the bait. "And it is doing perfectly fine." "Right. Right." Jamal smirked, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Well, let me know if you ever need a small business loan. My firm does pro bono work for struggling startups occasionally." Before I could respond to his deeply condescending offer, a distinguished-looking man in a sharp tuxedo approached our group. I recognized him immediately as one of my father's hospital board members. "Richard," he boomed cheerfully as my father walked over to join us. "And this must be the rest of the wonderful family." "I know Olivia." Of course. But who is this young man? My father's face immediately tightened. The jovial, proud patriarch vanished in an instant, replaced by a man terrified of losing his precious social standing. "This is Ethan," my father said, the name catching in his throat like a sharp fishbone. "Ah, you must be the other doctor in the family I have heard so much about." The board member smiled brightly, extending his hand toward me. "Actually, sir," I said politely, shaking his hand, "I am not a doctor. I work in software." The silence that fell over our small group was absolute and suffocating. The board member blinked, looking deeply confused by this revelation. "Oh, I see. Well, software is very modern." He quickly excused himself, clearly sensing the sudden and drastic drop in temperature. As soon as the man was safely out of earshot, my father rounded on me, his face contorting with pure, unadulterated rage. He grabbed me tightly by the bicep, his fingers digging into my arm like claws, and dragged me forcefully into the hallway, away from the prying eyes of the guests. My mother, Olivia, and Jamal followed closely behind us, forming a tribunal of harsh judgment. "What the hell is wrong with you?" my father hissed, his voice vibrating with suppressed fury. "You just had to embarrass us. Did not you? You could not just play along for one single night. Play along with what?" "Dad," I asked, my voice rising just a fraction to match his energy. "The lie that I am a doctor." "You are a dropout," my mother snapped, stepping forward, her diamond necklace rattling against her chest. "You are an ugly, embarrassing college dropout. We invite our most important friends here, and you show up looking like a nobody talking about your pathetic computer games. It is a medical platform. Mom." I tried to explain, hoping they would finally understand. It is saving lives every single day. But it was like talking to a solid brick wall. Jamal leaned against the wooden doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest, clearly enjoying the show unfolding before him. "Look, man, you are ruining their night. You do not fit in here anymore. Just accept your place and move on." My father pointed a trembling finger directly at my face, his breathing heavy. "I gave you everything. I paved the way for you to be a surgeon, to be a man of respect, and you threw it all away to stare at a glowing screen. You are a complete failure. Ethan, you bring nothing but shame to this family." "Dad, I came here to celebrate your anniversary," I started to say, wanting to de-escalate the situation. "Get out and stay out." My father roared the volume, finally breaking his hushed country club whisper. "Do not you dare show your face around this family again until you have made something of yourself. Pack your pathetic bag and leave my property. You are no longer my son." I did not cry. I did not scream back at them. I simply looked at the four of them standing together, my father hyperventilating with rage, my mother looking at me with pure, unmasked disgust, my sister smirking triumphantly, and my brother-in-law shaking his head in mock pity. "Okay," I said softly, refusing to give them the satisfaction of breaking me. "I will leave." I turned and walked out the heavy front door, stepping directly into the howling blizzard, leaving their toxic warmth and conditional love completely behind me. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me with a final echoing thud, the sound carried out into the freezing night, instantly swallowed by the roaring wind. Snowflakes whipped violently through the air, tearing at my dark blazer as I walked down the long cobblestone driveway of the Hamptons estate. I did not look back. My expression remained entirely unreadable. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and pressed a single pre-programmed button. Within 90 seconds, the blinding headlights of a massive armored black Maybach pierced through the thick curtain of the blizzard. The vehicle glided silently up the driveway and stopped perfectly aligned with where I stood. The driver, a towering man in a sharp tactical suit named David, stepped out immediately. He opened a heavy black umbrella and held it steadily over my head to shield me from the storm. "Good evening, Mr. Vance," David said respectfully. "Are we heading back to the city tonight?" "Yes, David," I replied, sliding into the heated leather-lined cavern of the back seat. "Take me home." As the Maybach slowly pulled away from the property, I allowed myself one final glance back at the glowing windows of my parents' estate. I could clearly see the silhouettes of my family moving around the dining room. They were drinking champagne and laughing completely unbothered by the fact that they had just thrown their own flesh and blood out into a deadly winter storm. What they did not know was that my little software company had gone public exactly 3 days prior. Nexus Health was not a game. It was a revolutionary diagnostic platform that was rapidly becoming the absolute backbone of modern global telehealth. I pulled my phone back out and opened my primary banking application. The numbers on the screen were almost too large to comprehend, glowing brightly in the dim cabin of the Maybach. I had just finalized the sale of a 20% stake in my company to a massive international venture capital firm. The available balance read $842,500,000. I was not a struggling dropout. I was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the entire country. But my family was so utterly blinded by their obsession with traditional titles and country club prestige that they never even bothered to run a simple web search on my company name. By the next morning, the brutal storm had cleared completely. Manhattan was bathed in blinding, crisp winter sunlight that reflected off the glass towers. I stood in the center of an empty, breathtaking architectural masterpiece. It was a triplex penthouse situated at the very top of a gleaming glass skyscraper on Billionaires Row. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed view of Central Park and the sprawling city grid below. The space was a testament to modern luxury, featuring floating glass staircases, imported Italian marble floors, and an infinity pool on the private wraparound terrace that made you feel like you were swimming in the clouds. I had purchased the penthouse for $50 million in pure cash. Originally, it was supposed to be a place to finally host my family. I had bought it as a tangible monument to prove to my father that my unconventional path was valid. I had spent 8 long years meticulously imagining the exact look of awe on his face when he walked through those massive double doors. But after last night's brutal eviction, I realized a fundamental truth. You absolutely cannot buy the respect of people who are firmly committed to misunderstanding you. I walked slowly through the massive living room, my footsteps echoing against the marble. The emptiness of the space brought a flood of memories crashing back. The lighting in my mind shifted from the bright sun of the penthouse to something harsh and unforgiving. It was 8 years earlier. I was 25 years old. I sat hunched over a cheap, wobbly folding table in a tiny mold-infested apartment in Queens. The heating had been broken for weeks. I was wearing 2 thick sweaters and a woolen beanie, my stiff fingers flying desperately across the keyboard of a battered laptop. Next to my computer sat a crushed can of energy drink, a stack of heavy medical textbooks, and a yellow notepad completely filled with complex diagnostic algorithms. I had made the hardest decision of my life that year. I was in my 3rd year of medical school, and I was utterly miserable. The archaic systems, the glaring inefficiency, the way critical patient care was constantly bottlenecked by endless bureaucratic paperwork drove me insane. But I saw a clear way to fix it. I saw exactly how advanced code could streamline diagnostics and connect struggling patients to global specialists in a matter of seconds. I took my massive business plan to my father to explain my vision. The memory shifted violently to Richard's lavish hospital office. My father, immaculate in his starched white coat, slammed his heavy fists on his mahogany desk, shaking the framed degrees on his wall. "You want to drop out of medical school to play with computers?" He screamed, his face an ugly mask of pure disappointment. "I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars preparing you to take over my legacy. You are throwing your entire life away." "Ethan, Dad," The future of medicine is in software. I pleaded with him. I can build something that reaches millions of people, not just the wealthy ones who can afford your exclusive clinic. You are a fool, he spat, turning his back on me. If you walk out of that school, you walk out of this family. I will not fund your delusions. I will not pay your rent. You will not see another single dime from me. He kept his word with terrifying efficiency. The very next day, my bank accounts were frozen. My car was repossessed by the family office without warning. I was entirely cut off from the only world I had ever known. I spent the next 3 years surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night. I worked as a late-night janitor at a corporate firm just to pay for my initial server space. I scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans from midnight until dawn, then coded from sunrise until noon. I ate cheap ramen noodles and plain white rice until I forgot what real food tasted like. There were agonizing days when the hunger and the sheer physical exhaustion were so intense. I genuinely thought my heart would stop beating, but I never quit. Every single time I wanted to give up and crawl back home. I heard my father's booming voice calling me a failure. I heard my mother loudly bragging to her socialite friends about Olivia's perfect grades while pretending her son did not exist. Their crushing rejection became my absolute fuel. It built an unshakable empire out of my grief. Standing by the towering windows of my $50 million penthouse, I took a slow, deep breath of the temperature-controlled air. I had thought the money and the massive success meant I was finally safe from their toxicity. But what I did not know was that the universe has a highly twisted sense of humor. Because while my digital empire was expanding rapidly to touch the sky, my father's carefully constructed world of medical prestige and power was beginning to rot from the inside out. They were about to desperately need the very dropout they had just thrown out into the snow. To fully grasp the absolute magnitude of the betrayal I endured. You have to understand the exact math of my family's toxic favoritism. It was not just an emotional abandonment. It was a highly calculated financial starvation designed specifically to force me into complete submission. During those grueling years of building Nexus Health, I watched my family shower immense wealth on everyone but me. 3 years after my exile, my company was still just a fragile startup, struggling to keep its servers online. We hit a critical wall. I needed exactly $10,000 to upgrade our security infrastructure to comply with federal health regulations. If I did not get that money, the platform would collapse entirely, and 3 years of blood, sweat, and starvation would vanish into thin air. I swallowed the very last shred of my pride and went to my parents' house. I did not ask for a handout. I brought a meticulously prepared business plan, detailed revenue projections, and a formal contract offering them 10% equity in my company for a mere $10,000 loan. My father did not even open the folder. He picked it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated with a deadly virus and dropped it straight into the trash can beside his desk. I do not fund hobbies. Ethan, he had said, refusing to even look up from his heavy medical journals. When you are ready to apologize, go back to school and become a real man. We can talk. Until then, go get a job bagging groceries. What made that rejection cut so incredibly deep was not just the flat refusal. It was the glaring, nauseating hypocrisy. Just 2 months prior to my desperate plea, Richard and Patricia had cheerfully written a $350,000 cash check to buy Olivia a premium commercial space in Manhattan. They bought her a stunning piece of real estate in Soho so she could open her boutique dermatology clinic. They did not ask her for a business plan. They did not ask for equity. They did not demand revenue projections. They simply handed the golden child a fully funded empire because Dr. Olivia sounded good at their elite country club dinners. Olivia had barely finished her residency. Yet, she was handed the keys to a kingdom she had not truly earned while I was scrubbing corporate toilets at midnight just to keep my startup alive. When Olivia married Jamal, the favoritism mutated into something even more grotesque. Jamal was exactly what my father wanted in a son. He was a ruthless, image-obsessed corporate attack dog. When they tied the knot, Richard gifted Jamal a $500,000 trust fund distribution as a welcome to the family present. $500,000 for simply marrying the golden child, while the biological son was denied $10,000 to survive. They actively starved me. They starved me of affection, of basic support, of fundamental human dignity. They wanted me to break under the pressure. They wanted me to crawl back on my hands and knees and admit they were right all along. But I did not break. I coded. I walked out of my father's office that day with nothing but the clothes on my back and a burning resolve that eclipsed any hunger or exhaustion I felt. I secured the server funding by selling my own blood plasma and taking out predatory high-interest personal loans. I pitched my platform to obscure venture capitalists in ill-fitting thrift store suits. I shook hands in sterile boardrooms where executives laughed at my youth, but could not deny the flawless architecture of my code. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Nexus Health user base skyrocketed from 10,000 to 100,000, and then to 10 million active users. Hospitals across the country began integrating my diagnostic artificial intelligence. The eventual ringing of the bell at the New York Stock Exchange validated every single sleepless night and every skipped meal. But while my star was ascending into the stratosphere, the heavy gravity of pure arrogance was beginning to crush my family's reality. I walked over to the sprawling marble kitchen island in my penthouse and pulled up a highly classified corporate dossier on my secure tablet. The bold logo at the top of the screen read, St. Jude Medical Consortium. It was the massive hospital network where my father served as chief medical officer. My father had spent his entire life building an impenetrable image of infallibility. He truly believed his crisp white coat made him a god among men. But gods are notoriously terrible at accounting. St. Jude was hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate. Richard, blinded by his own towering ego, had spearheaded a massive and disastrous expansion project. He had funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into luxury VIP patient suites to cater to his wealthy friends while completely neglecting basic hospital infrastructure and essential digital modernization. The hospital was running on outdated paper-based systems from 2 decades ago. Critical medical errors were rampant. Malpractice lawsuits were piling up faster than their legal team could process them. The hospital's board of directors was in a state of absolute panic. They were on the verge of declaring bankruptcy. The only possible way to save the hospital, and more importantly, to save my father's lavish pension and his precious social reputation, was a total buyout by a massive tech medical conglomerate capable of digitizing and absorbing their failing infrastructure. Simultaneously, the pressure cooker was whistling loudly in Olivia and Jamal's perfectly curated lives. Jamal was a senior lawyer, but he was hungry for the ultimate prize, a managing partner position. To secure that title, he did not just need to be a brilliant attorney. He needed to be a Manhattan social titan. He needed to bring in corporate whales. The firm's senior partners cared exclusively about appearances, immense wealth, and elite connections. Olivia, completely consumed by her own vanity, was relentlessly pressuring Jamal to host the social event of the decade. She wanted a massive charity gala that would cement their status at the very top of the Manhattan social hierarchy. They desperately needed a venue that screamed unimaginable wealth. They had spent weeks frantically trying to secure a location, but every elite space was either fully booked or outright refused to rent to people they considered new money. They were all suffocating under the crushing weight of their own egos. My father was desperate for a corporate savior. Jamal was desperate for a golden contract to make partner. And Olivia was desperate for a palace to show off to her hollow friends. The stark contrast between my current reality and those dark years of exile still haunts the edges of my mind. My parents did not merely cut me off financially. They weaponized their wealth to ensure my failure seemed inevitable. They wanted my starvation to be a public spectacle. a cautionary tale for anyone in our social circle who dared to defy Richard's grand design. To understand their cruelty, you must look at how they funded Olivia's rise to absolute mediocrity. While I was pawning my few remaining possessions to afford basic cloud hosting for Nexus Health, my parents were throwing $250,000 launch party for Olivia's dermatology practice. I remember standing across the street in the pouring rain, watching through the floor-to-ceiling glass of her clinic. The space was draped in imported white orchids. Waiters served beluga caviar. My father stood at the center of the room, raising a glass to toast his brilliant daughter. He had fully financed the entire operation, securing the prime real estate, purchasing the state-of-the-art laser equipment, and hiring a top-tier public relations firm to plaster Olivia's face across local luxury magazines. She had never written a business plan. She had never pitched an investor. She was simply handed the keys to an empire because she obeyed the family script. The financial disparity was a deliberate psychological attack. When Jamal entered the picture, my parents doubled down. Jamal was a junior associate at the time, hungry for power, but lacking the generational wealth required to truly infiltrate Manhattan's elite circles. My father saw an opportunity to buy loyalty. Richard paid off Jamal's massive law school debts in a single afternoon. He secured them a luxury condo in Tribeca as a wedding gift. He even leveraged his hospital board connections to feed lucrative medical malpractice defense contracts directly to Jamal's firm, artificially accelerating Jamal's path to senior associate. They built a glittering house of cards on a foundation of my father's seemingly endless hospital wealth. I watched all of this unfold from the shadows of my freezing Queens apartment. Every time my father wrote a 6-figure check to fund Olivia's vanity projects or Jamal's corporate ambitions, it was a deliberate message to me. This is what you walked away from. This is the luxury you could have had if you simply surrendered your autonomy. But their financial warfare backfired spectacularly. Handing Olivia an empire completely destroyed her work ethic. She spent more time attending high society luncheons than consulting with patients. Her clinic operated at a massive loss, entirely subsidized by monthly wire transfers from my father's personal accounts. Jamal grew lazy and entitled, assuming his father-in-law's connections would automatically hand him a managing partner position without him having to do the actual grinding legal work. They became soft, arrogant, and entirely dependent on the bank of Richard. My starvation, on the other hand, made me lethal. When you have to choose between eating dinner and paying for an extra terabyte of server space to keep your code alive, you learn how to optimize every single line of data. You learn how to pitch your vision with the desperate, undeniable conviction of a man who has absolutely nothing to lose. I built Nexus Health to be bulletproof because I could not afford a single failure. My poverty bred innovation. Their unlimited funding bred complacency. And now the bill for their complacency was coming due. My father's grand financial fortress was inherently tied to the success of St. Jude Medical Consortium. His massive executive salary, his hefty performance bonuses, and his equity shares were the sole engine funding Olivia and Jamal's extravagant lifestyle. When Richard's reckless VIP expansion project caused the hospital's profit margins to absolutely crater, the shockwaves hit our family immediately. The monthly wire transfers to Olivia's failing clinic stopped. The country club memberships went unpaid. The bank of Richard was suddenly terrifyingly empty. This sudden financial drought explained the sheer unadulterated panic radiating from Olivia and Jamal. They were drowning in the exorbitant overhead costs of their Tribeca condo and the clinic. Jamal desperately needed to secure the managing partner position to access the firm's profit-sharing pool. Olivia needed to attract elite, ultra-wealthy clients to save her failing business. They needed a massive public relations triumph to project an aura of immense wealth, hoping to attract fresh investors and high-paying clients before their house of cards collapsed entirely. They needed a gala. They needed a venue that screamed generational wealth and untouchable prestige. They needed to trick Manhattan's elite into believing they were still at the absolute top of the food chain. I stood in my $50 million penthouse, the digital dossier of their impending financial ruin glowing on my secure tablet. A sharp rhythmic buzzing broke the total silence of my home office. I glanced down at my phone resting on the expansive mahogany desk. The caller identification displayed a private number, but I recognized the assigned ringtone. It was my primary real estate broker from one of the most exclusive agencies in the city. I picked up the device and accepted the call. "Speak," I commanded quietly. "Mr. Vance, I apologize for the interruption." The crisp voice of my lead broker echoed through the speaker. "I am fully aware you instructed us to keep the lower floor of your penthouse strictly vacant for your private art gallery. However, we have received a highly unusual and extremely persistent request. A couple is practically begging to rent the raw space for a single night to host a high society charity gala. They are offering triple the standard premium rate. It is frankly an absurd amount of money." I leaned back in my leather chair, swirling the cold remnants of my coffee. "I do not need their money. Deny the request immediately." "Understood." "Sir," the broker replied quickly, "I will inform Mr. Jamal Washington and Dr. for Olivia Washington that the space remains unavailable." My grip on the ceramic coffee cup froze. My knuckles turned stark white. The sheer impossible irony of the universe settled over me like a heavy blanket. The very people who had mocked my poverty, the people who had laughed as I was thrown into a blizzard, were now blindly begging to rent the floor beneath my feet just to save their crumbling social status. "Wait," I said, my voice dropping into a dangerously cold register. "Did you say Jamal and Olivia Washington?" "Yes, sir." The husband is a corporate lawyer, the wife a dermatologist. They have been incredibly persistent, borderline desperate. If I am speaking frankly, they insist this gala is vital for their careers. Shall I firmly tell them no? The memory of my father screaming at me to get out and stay out echoed vividly in my mind, followed instantly by Jamal's mocking laughter as he offered me a small business loan for my little apps. A sharp, cold smile formed on my face. "No," I said slowly, savoring the absolute power of the moment. "Tell them yes. Draft the rental agreement immediately under my holding company, Horizon Assets, LLC. Do not under any circumstances reveal my personal name. Let them believe they are renting from an anonymous absent foreign investor. Consider it done. Mr. Vance." I ended the call and set the phone back down on the desk. The trap was perfectly set. The web was tightening and my family was sprinting directly into the center of it, entirely by their own design. While Olivia and Jamal were popping champagne over securing a venue they could not actually afford, a much larger, far more devastating trap was snapping shut across town. The real estate rental was merely a psychological appetizer. The main course was my father. Richard Vance had built his entire career on the illusion of absolute invincibility. He walked the sterile halls of St. Jude Medical Consortium, like a feudal lord demanding unwavering deference from every nurse resident and administrative clerk who crossed his path. But pure arrogance is a highly blinding condition. My father was a man obsessed with the shallow aesthetics of medicine rather than the actual mechanics of modern healthcare. Over the past 4 years, he had aggressively pushed the hospital board to approve a $200 million expansion project. He envisioned a massive opulent wing dedicated exclusively to high-end net worth vitamin P patients. He poured staggering amounts of capital into importing Italian marble floors for the private lobbies, hiring exclusive executive chefs for the recovery suite, and outfitting the rooms with luxury amenities designed solely to attract his elite country club peers. But while Richard was busy selecting expensive mahogany paneling and picking out designer scrubs for his elite surgical team, the core infrastructure of St. Jude was actively rotting from the inside out. He had completely ignored the hospital's aging digital framework. The facility was still running on fragmented paper-heavy filing systems and obsolete data servers from an entire decade ago. The consequences of this massive administrative oversight were catastrophic. Patient files were routinely misplaced. Diagnostic reports were delayed by days. Critical communication between emergency departments and specialized surgeons broke down on a daily basis. The resulting medical errors triggered a relentless avalanche of devastating malpractice lawsuits. Street. Jude was bleeding cash at an unprecedented, terrifying rate. The VIP wing. His supposed crowning achievement sat largely empty because modern, ultra-wealthy patients preferred streamlined, high-tech boutique clinics over a mismanaged, bureaucratic nightmare. The hospital's credit rating tanked. Suppliers were threatening to cut off essential medical deliveries due to severely past-due invoices. The board of directors was in a state of absolute unmitigated panic. They were staring directly down the barrel of a highly public Chapter 11 bankruptcy. If St. Jude collapsed entirely, my father would not just lose his prestigious title as chief medical officer. He would lose his massive executive salary, his extensive equity shares, and his heavily leveraged pension. The total destruction of his reputation would be swift and merciless in the elite social circles he were ripped. The hospital board was already preparing to throw him to the wolves, demanding his immediate resignation behind closed doors to appease the furious shareholders. There was only one possible lifeline left to save the sinking ship. The board desperately needed a massive corporate buyout. They required a tech medical conglomerate with enough liquid capital to absorb their astronomical debts and the advanced digital infrastructure necessary to drag the failing hospital into the modern era. They needed a financial savior with deep pockets and aggressive modernizing capabilities. And they found one. Or rather, I found them. I left the quiet sanctuary of my penthouse and took my armored vehicle directly to the gleaming headquarters of Nexus Health. I stepped into our hyper-modern boardroom, a vast space dominated by seamless glass panels and interactive holographic data displays. I took my seat at the head of the long obsidian table, flanked by my top executive officers and a team of ruthless corporate acquisition specialists. My chief financial officer, a brilliant and calculating strategist, swiped a tablet, sending the catastrophic financial red lines of St. Jude onto the massive primary display wall. The glowing red numbers painted a stark picture of a rapidly dying empire. St. Jude is bleeding out completely. My executive reported, pointing a digital laser at the plunging revenue charts. Dr. Richard Vance fundamentally mismanaged their capital reserves. They are exactly 3 weeks away from total insolvency. They are practically begging on their knees for our acquisition offer to go through. I stared at the digital dossier on the huge screen. A high-resolution photograph of my father was prominently displayed next to the hospital's failing metrics. He looked so incredibly proud, so arrogant, so blissfully unaware that the faceless corporate entity about to swallow his legacy whole was controlled by the very sun he had thrown into a blizzard. According to our corporate intelligence gathering, my father had spent the last 2 weeks loudly bragging at his country club that a global tech conglomerate was coming in to officially partner with him. He was confidently telling everyone who would listen that this massive acquisition would validate his long-term vision, firmly securing his position as a visionary healthcare leader. He truly believed the incoming anonymous CEO would retain his services, desperately relying on his prestigious name and social connections to anchor the new hospital brand. He had absolutely no idea the incoming CEO considered his name a toxic liability that needed to be surgically excised from the industry. We acquire them immediately. I ordered, my voice carrying absolute, unquestionable authority across the silent boardroom. We absorb their entire hospital network into the Nexus Artificial Intelligence Diagnostic Grid. We will rip out their archaic filing systems and replace them with our proprietary software. But we do it completely quietly. I want the holding companies layered intricately through multiple offshore accounts and proxy boards. Richard Vance cannot know that Nexus Health is the primary entity behind the buyout until the ink is completely dry on the final signature. I want him entirely blind until the trap snaps shut. My executives nodded in unison, fully prepared to execute the hostile takeover with surgical precision. The immense corporate machinery of my empire began to move, targeting the very foundation of my father's arrogant pride. The financial starvation he had subjected me to was nothing compared to the corporate obliteration he was about to face. While my executives drafted the lethal acquisition protocols in our secure headquarters. Another kind of desperation was reaching a boiling point miles away in a sleek corner office in Midtown Manhattan. Jamal was pacing the length of his imported Persian rug, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles strained against his tailored cuffs. Jamal had built his entire identity around projecting an aura of untouchable success. As a highly ambitious African-American lawyer in a predominantly old money corporate law firm, he operated with a ruthless chip on his shoulder. He constantly overcompensated, adopting an extreme brand of elitism that allowed him to look down on anyone who could not afford a luxury country club membership. He was entirely obsessed with optics, but optics were becoming incredibly expensive to maintain. Jamal was currently a senior associate, but the coveted title of managing partner was the only prize that mattered to him. Securing that promotion required more than just winning court cases. It demanded bringing in massive corporate whales as clients. The firm's partners judged their successors entirely by the sheer magnitude of their social influence and their proximity to generational wealth. Jamal needed to prove he belonged in the absolute upper echelon of Manhattan society. He needed a crowning achievement to dazzle the senior partners and force them to hand him the promotion. His wife was fighting an equally desperate battle for social survival. Olivia had designed her boutique dermatology clinic to be an exclusive playground for the ultra-rich, but exclusivity requires an endless stream of cash to sustain the illusion. With my father's hospital network quietly imploding, the generous monthly wire transfers that kept Olivia's failing clinic afloat had abruptly ceased. The reality of her situation was terrifying. Her lavish waiting room was empty. Her premium inventory was expiring. She was secretly drowning in debt, terrified that her shallow socialite friends would discover she was no longer backed by the Bank of Richard. Olivia and Jamal devised a high-stakes strategy to save themselves. They decided to host a massive, obscenely extravagant charity gala. They would invite the most powerful politicians, hospital board members, and corporate legal titans in the city. The gala was entirely a smoke-ocasy screen. By projecting an image of limitless wealth and philanthropic power, Jamal aimed to lock down the managing partner vote, while Olivia planned to lure in a fresh batch of ultra-wealthy clients to save her dying clinic. They were betting their entire financial future on a single night of engineered perfection. There was only one massive problem. They could not secure a venue. For weeks, Olivia had been frantically touring the most prestigious locations in New York City. The Plaza, the Pierre, the elite private clubs overlooking the park. But Manhattan high society operates on a rigid, unspoken caste system. The truly elite venues saw right through Olivia's frantic desperation. They recognized her as heavily leveraged new money. The venue directors demanded exorbitant upfront cash deposits that Olivia simply did not have. When Jamal attempted to leverage his law firm's name to negotiate discounts or deferred payment plans, the exclusive venues outright refused to do business with them. They were being shut out of the very social circles they so desperately wanted to rule. The pressure was cracking their perfectly curated marriage. Their luxury Tribeca condo had become a battleground of whispered arguments and mounting panic. Jamal blamed Olivia for losing her father's financial backing. Olivia screamed at Jamal for failing to secure the promotion that would save them from bankruptcy. They were two hollow people realizing their entire existence was built on borrowed money and fake prestige. They were running out of time and completely out of viable options. In a final act of sheer desperation, Jamal instructed his assistant to scrape the most exclusive private real estate listings in the city. He needed a private residence. Something so unimaginably wealthy that hosting a gala there would instantly cement his status as a kingmaker. That was when his assistant stumbled upon a discreet, unadvertised listing for the lower floor of a triplex penthouse on Billionaires Row. The property description alone rire of absolute untouchable power. Floating glass staircases, custom Italian marble, unobstructed panoramic views of Central Park. The listing noted that the owner was an anonymous foreign investor operating through a holding company called Horizon Assets LLC. The rental price for a single night was astronomical. But Jamal saw it as his final lifeline. He maxed out his last 2 platinum credit cards and pulled the remaining liquidity from his dwindling investment portfolio just to make the initial offer. Jamal and Olivia bombarded the real estate broker with calls. They sent aggressive emails detailing their social standing name, dropping my father's hospital and Jamal's law firm, demanding to be given priority. They were literally begging an anonymous billionaire to let them borrow a fraction of his prestige for just one evening. They believed that securing this unbelievable venue would solve all their problems in one sweeping victory. They thought they were playing a brilliant game of high-stakes social chess. They never paused to consider who actually owned the board they were playing on. As I sat in my boardroom reviewing the finalized acquisition strategy for my father's hospital, I thought about the sheer poetry of the situation. My family had spent 8 years actively trying to destroy my future. Now they were emptying their final bank accounts to rent a single floor of my home, mistakenly believing it was their path to salvation. The financial starvation they had subjected me to had merely forged my empire. Their reliance on unearned wealth was currently digging their graves. The trap was primed. The players were perfectly positioned, and the final curtain was about to rise on the most devastating night of their lives. It was late Tuesday evening when the encrypted line on my private desk phone illuminated the darkened office. The sprawling city of Manhattan glittered endlessly below my floor-to-ceiling windows, a grid of golden light that felt entirely under my control. I set down the financial dossier of my father's failing hospital and pressed the flashing button to accept the secure call. The crisp, professional voice of Alexander Sterling, my lead real estate broker at Prime Brokerage, echoed through the quiet room. He sounded unusually tense, a stark contrast to his normally unflappable demeanor. "Mr. Vance Alexander," began, his tone careful and measured. "I sincerely apologize for calling so late on your private line. I am fully aware of your strict instructions regarding the lower level of your triplex penthouse. You designated that specific floor exclusively for your private art collection and explicitly ordered us to keep it vacant. However, a situation has developed that requires your immediate executive input." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the reflection of the city lights in the glass. "Go on, Alexander." "I am listening." "We have received a highly irregular rental inquiry," he explained, clearing his throat. "A couple is aggressively petitioning to rent your lower floor for a single night to host a high society charity gala. They have bypassed our standard application process entirely. They are offering triple the premium rate for the evening. It is an absurd amount of capital for a one-night event, but their persistence is bordering on sheer desperation. They have called my office 12 times in the past 48 hours. I drummed my fingers against the cool mahogany of my desk. I do not need their money. Alexander, you know my policies. Deny the request and block their contact numbers. I understand, Sir Alexander replied smoothly. I will personally inform Mr. Jamal Washington and Dr. Olivia Washington that the property remains strictly off limits. My hand froze over the desk. The air in my massive office suddenly felt thin. I stopped breathing for a fraction of a second as the names registered in my mind. Jamal and Olivia Washington. My sister and my brother-in-law. The very same people who had stood in a freezing blizzard just 3 weeks ago laughing as my father threw me out of his estate like a piece of garbage. The same arrogant lawyer who had mocked my coding career and offered me a pathetic small business loan. Wait, I commanded my voice, dropping into a dangerously quiet register. Did you just say Jamal and Olivia Washington? Yes. Mr. Vance Alexander answered, slightly confused by my sudden change in tone. The husband is a senior corporate attorney at Harrison Hayes and Croft. The wife is a high-end dermatologist. They have been relentlessly aggressive. They insist this gala is an absolute life-or-death matter for their professional careers. They even sent over a portfolio of their social credentials to prove they are worthy of the space. A cold, razor-sharp smile slowly spread across my face. The sheer, impossible irony of the universe was unfolding right in front of me. Forward their communications to my secure server immediately. I ordered. I want to see exactly what they sent you. Within seconds. My tablet chimed with an incoming encrypted file. I opened it and found a string of emails and a transcribed voicemail. I tapped the audio file. The room filled with the sound of Jamal's voice. He sounded nothing like the untouchable elite lawyer who had sneered at me in the Hamptons. He sounded frantic, breathless, and pathetic. "Alexander, we need this space," Jamal's recorded voice pleaded. "I am a senior associate at the top corporate firm in this city. My father-in-law is Dr. Richard Vance, the chief medical officer at St. Jude Medical Consortium. We have the capital. We have the guest list. We are bringing the absolute top tier of Manhattan society to your client's property. Tell your anonymous investor that turning us down would be a massive social mistake. We will pay whatever he wants. Just give us the contract." I listened to the voicemail a second time, savoring every single syllable of his desperation. Jamal was leveraging my father's hospital to secure a venue, completely unaware that I was the phantom billionaire currently executing a hostile takeover of that exact same hospital. He was trying to use a crumbling empire to buy his way into my house. I opened the accompanying emails. Olivia had written them. Her messages were dripping with fake prestige, boasting about her boutique clinic and demanding special treatment. She claimed they needed a venue that reflected their immense generational wealth. She was attempting to project an illusion of unlimited power while secretly emptying her bank accounts to afford a single night of fake royalty. "Mr. Vance," Alexander said tentatively over the phone line. "Shall I proceed with the denial?" I stood up and walked slowly toward the towering glass window, looking down at the crawling yellow taxis 50 stories below. I thought about the 8 years of emotional starvation. I thought about the crushing poverty they had forced upon me, the freezing nights in Queens, the endless mockery. They had built their entire identities on the belief that I was beneath them. Now they were literally begging to rent the floor beneath my feet. "No!" "Alexander," we said, my voice vibrating with a dark, absolute certainty. "Do not deny them. Tell them yes." Sir Alexander sounded stunned. "You want to approve the rental. I want you to draft the agreement immediately." I instructed my mind locking into place. "But you will follow my conditions to the letter. Execute the contract exclusively under my holding company, Horizon Assets, LLC. Do not reveal my personal identity. Let them believe they have successfully rented the space from an eccentric, absent foreign billionaire. They must remain completely blind to who owns the building. Consider it done." "Mr. Vance." I ended the call and set the phone face down on the sleek surface of my desk. The trap was perfectly set. The heavy steel jaws of consequence were pulled back, waiting for my family to blindly step right into the center. I walked over to the massive window overlooking the city, feeling a profound sense of calm wash over me. For years, they had controlled the narrative. They had dictated who had value and who was disposable. Now, I controlled the entire board. I wanted this illusion to be absolutely flawless. I immediately drafted a follow-up email to Alexander detailing the specific conditions of the rental agreement. I instructed him to waive the standard security deposit, but to demand the full premium rental fee in cash transferred upfront by the close of the business day. I also told Alexander to include a special VIP clause. The clause explicitly stated that the anonymous owner was deeply impressed by Mr. Washington's esteemed legal reputation and Dr. Washington's elite medical clinic. It was pure, unadulterated bait. I knew exactly how my family operated. Flattery was their ultimate weakness. If I made them feel like they had earned this venue through their sheer social superiority, they would throw every last dollar they had into making the gala a reality. They would leverage themselves into financial oblivion just to maintain the facade. Across the city in their cramped Tribeca condo, the notification chimed on Jamal's phone. I could almost picture the scene unfolding. Jamal reading the email from the real estate brokerage, his eyes widening in pure disbelief before shifting into arrogant triumph. He would show the email to Olivia, pointing directly to the sentence where the mysterious billionaire praised his legal pedigree. They would pop an expensive bottle of champagne they could not afford, celebrating their supposed brilliance. Jamal genuinely believed his aggressive negotiation tactics had broken down the walls of Billionaires Row. He thought he had bullied his way into the most exclusive real estate in Manhattan. He had absolutely no idea that I had simply opened the front door and laid out a red carpet leading directly to his own professional execution. The next morning, the financial verification came through on my secure tablet. I sat at my kitchen island sipping a dark espresso and watched the digital transaction hit the Horizon Assets holding account. $250,000. The payment had been wired in full. My financial analysts at Nexus Health had already run a quiet, perfectly legal background check on Jamal and Olivia's liquid assets as part of our standard vendor vetting process. I knew exactly what that wire transfer meant. Jamal had completely liquidated his remaining stock portfolios. Olivia had drained the emergency operating funds from her failing dermatology clinic. They had taken out high-interest short-term personal loans just to cover the premium catering and the extravagant floral arrangements. They were now financially hollow. They had bet every single cent of their future on this one spectacular night. By Thursday afternoon, Alexander sent over the finalized event itinerary and the mandatory security guest list. Since my building maintained the highest security protocols in New York City, every single attendee had to be vetted and approved by my personal security team prior to entry. I opened the encrypted file on my tablet and began scrolling through the names. It was a masterclass in social climbing. Jamal had invited the senior managing partners from his law firm, the men who held his potential promotion in their hands. He had invited powerful district attorneys, corporate judges, and wealthy real estate developers. Olivia had invited a swarm of Manhattan socialites, fashion influencers, and elite plastic surgeons. And then right at the top of the VIP section, I saw them, Dr. Richard Vance and Patricia Vance, my father and my mother. They were listed as the guests of honor. The sheer arrogance of it made me laugh out loud in the empty penthouse. My father was currently staring down the barrel of a massive hospital bankruptcy. He was days away from facing a board of directors who wanted his head on a silver platter. Yet here he was preparing to put on a tailored tuxedo and sip premium champagne, pretending he was the king of New York. He was probably planning to use this very gala to hunt down corporate investors, hoping to find a savior for his sinking medical empire. He was going to be standing in my house drinking my champagne, completely oblivious to the fact that his corporate savior and his biggest disappointment were the exact same person. I forwarded the guest list to my head of security, David. I gave him strict, precise instructions. When the guests arrived on Friday night, the lobby security was to treat Jamal and Olivia like absolute royalty. They were to be escorted through the grand lobby with the utmost respect. The staff was ordered to comply with their every demand. I wanted them to feel invincible. I wanted their egos inflated to the absolute maximum capacity, expanding like balloons right up until the moment I walked into the room with a needle, with the logistics firmly in place. I turned my attention to my own preparations. I had a tailor come to the penthouse that evening. I did not want to wear a standard corporate suit. This was not a business meeting. This was a reckoning. I selected a midnight black custom-tailored Tom Ford tuxedo. The fit was razor-sharp, exuding a quiet, terrifying authority. I paired it with a vintage PC Philippe Nautilus watch, a subtle but undeniable marker of extreme, untouchable wealth. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirrors in my master dressing room. The man looking back at me was unrecognizable from the exhausted, starving medical school dropout who had begged for a $10,000 loan. My jaw was set. My eyes were cold and focused. I had spent 8 years allowing their voices to dictate my worth. I had let my father's screaming rejection echo in my head every single time I faced a setback. I had let my mother's mocking laughter push me to the brink of physical collapse. But that version of Ethan was dead. He had frozen to death in that Queens apartment a long time ago. The man standing in the mirror was the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire. I walked out to the private terrace and looked out over the glittering expanse of Central Park. The crisp night air filled my lungs. Below me, millions of people were rushing through their lives, completely unaware of the precise, calculated storm that was about to hit Billionaires Row. Tomorrow night, my family would walk into this building, believing they had finally conquered the world. Tomorrow night, I would show them exactly who owned it. Friday morning arrived with the sharp, unforgiving clarity of a surgical blade. I stood in my penthouse, watching the sun crest over the East River before stepping into my private elevator. My driver, David, was waiting in the subterranean garage with the engine of the Maybach already running. We navigated the dense Manhattan traffic in complete silence, moving swiftly toward the sleek glass monolith that housed Nexus Health headquarters. Today was not just the day of the gala. Today was the day I legally dismantled my father's entire professional existence. I walked onto the top-floor executive suite with a relentless, measured pace. The atmosphere in the boardroom was electric. My top executives were already assembled around the massive obsidian table, their tablets glowing with live financial feeds. At the far end of the room, the primary digital display wall highlighted the terminal status of St. Jude Medical Consortium. The red lines on the graphs looked like a flatlining heartbeat. Victor, my chief financial officer, stood at attention as I took my seat at the head of the table. He was a ruthless numbers man who had orchestrated the intricate web of shell companies, keeping my identity hidden from the hospital's board of directors. "We are at the finish line," Ethan Victor announced, projecting a new series of documents onto the main screen. The board of directors at St. Jude voted unanimously at midnight. They had no other option. Their credit lines were officially frozen at 6 o'clock in the morning. If they did not sign the acquisition agreement today, they would have been forced to lock their emergency room doors by Monday morning. I stared at the high-resolution images of the hospital's executive board members displayed on the wall, right in the center. Looking characteristically arrogant and entirely oblivious was the official portrait of Dr. Richard Vance. "Walk me through the final restructuring clauses," I commanded, keeping my voice perfectly level despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Victor tapped his tablet, pulling up the exact legal phrasing. "Per your strict instructions, the buyout is being executed through Vanguard Medical Holdings, a subsidiary entirely controlled by Nexus Health. The board of St. Jude thinks they are being bailed out by a faceless European investment group. We agreed to absorb their $200 million debt from the failed VIP wing expansion. We are bringing their entire network under our proprietary artificial intelligence diagnostic grid." "And the executive restructuring terms?" I asked, leaning forward, clasping my hands together on the cool glass of the table. Ironclad Victor replied with a predatory smile. "The moment the funds transfer clears, Vanguard Medical Holdings assumes absolute operational control." Clause 7. 4 grants. The incoming parent company the immediate unchallengeable right to terminate any senior executive without severance if financial negligence is proven. We have compiled over 400 pages documenting Dr. Richard Vance's direct financial negligence regarding the VIP expansion project. He bypassed basic compliance protocols to fund luxury suites for his country club friends. It is gross mismanagement. I looked at my father's photograph on the digital wall. For my entire life, Richard Vance had wielded his title like a weapon. He used his position as chief medical officer to belittle anyone who did not wear a white coat. He had looked at my coding software, the very software that was now generating billions of dollars and saving millions of lives, and called it a pathetic hobby. He had thrown me into a blizzard because my lack of a medical degree embarrassed him in front of his wealthy peers. Now his entire identity, his pension, his prestigious title, and his fragile ego were resting on the desk in front of me, condensed into a stack of legal acquisition papers. The sheer poetry of the moment was almost overwhelming. My father had spent the last week actively boasting to his elite social circle that a massive corporate bailout was going to validate his visionary leadership. He truly believed the incoming investors would beg him to stay on board to lend his prestigious name to their new brand. He thought he was untouchable. He was completely blind to the fact that the corporate guillotine was already falling. "Bring me the signature pages," as I ordered my head of corporate acquisitions. A sharp woman named Rachel slid the heavy leather binder across the polished obsidian table. She handed me a solid gold fountain pen. "The hospital board members have already provided their digital signatures via the secure portal," Rachel explained, pointing to the glowing green confirmations on her screen. "They are sweating bullets waiting for our countersignature. The second you sign the wire transfer, Execute's St. Jude Medical Consortium ceases to be an independent entity. It becomes property of Nexus Health." I took the heavy pen in my hand. I thought about the moldy, freezing apartment in Queens. I thought about the days I went without food just to keep my servers running. I thought about the $10,000 loan my father had laughed at, tossing my business plan into the trash like common garbage. I pressed the nib of the pen to the thick premium paper. With 3 swift, fluid strokes, I signed my name. "Execute the transfer," I said, sliding the binder back to Rachel. Victor tapped his screen. A satisfying low chime echoed through the boardroom. The massive display wall refreshed, turning from a chaotic sea of red financial warnings to a sleek, unified blue screen bearing the Nexus Health corporate logo. "It is done," Victor confirmed, looking up from his terminal. "We own them. The hospital network is officially ours." I stood up from the table, adjusting the cuffs of my dark suit. "Excellent work, everyone. Begin the integration protocols immediately. Lock down their internal servers and initiate the software transition. But hold the executive termination notices. Do not send the official restructuring emails to the hospital board just yet." Victor looked mildly confused. "Sir, usually we clean house the moment the ink is dry." "When do you want the termination notices delivered?" I looked out the window, visualizing the massive skyline and the penthouse waiting for me on Billionaires Row. "Tonight," I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. "I will be delivering the termination notice to the chief medical officer personally." The boardroom fell silent as the executives registered the deadly serious tone in my voice. They did not know the personal history, but they recognized the absolute authority of a CEO moving in for the kill. I walked out of the room, my mind already shifting to the next crucial piece of the chessboard. My father's empire was now securely in my pocket, legally dismantled and waiting for the final blow. But the hospital acquisition was only half of the trap. The other half belonged to the ambitious, arrogant lawyer who was currently polishing his velvet tuxedo and preparing to host the party of a lifetime. It was time to deal with Jamal. Across town, inside the imposing glass and steel monument that housed Harrison Hayes and Croft Jamal Washington, was riding the highest adrenaline rush of his entire professional career. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in his corner office, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt, practicing the exact smile he would use when he was finally named managing partner. His phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications from vendors finalizing the details for the penthouse gala. But he ignored them. He had just received an urgent summon from Donovan Croft, the most ruthless and powerful senior partner in the entire firm. Jamal strode down the long corridor, his expensive leather shoes sinking into the thick carpet. He felt untouchable. He had secured the most exclusive venue in Manhattan. His wife was about to rake in millions in new clientele, and his social standing was about to eclipse everyone he knew. He pushed open the heavy mahogany doors to Donovan Croft's sprawling executive suite with unbridled confidence. Donovan was standing by his desk pouring 2 glasses of remarkably expensive scotch. He handed one to Jamal, a rare gesture of absolute respect that made Jamal's heart pound with triumph. "Drink up, Washington," Donovan said, raising his glass with a predatory grin. "You are going to need it to celebrate. We just landed the white whale." Jamal took a sip, the smooth liquid burning down his throat. "Who did we get?" "Nexus Health," Donovan announced, his voice vibrating with barely contained excitement. "The largest, most aggressive health technology conglomerate on the planet. Just retained our firm. They quietly acquired the St. Jude Medical Consortium this morning. It is a massive multi-billion-dollar hostile takeover, and Nexus wants us to handle every single piece of the regulatory restructuring. The retainer they just wired over is $50 million. Jamal nearly choked on his scotch. $50 million. That is the largest single contract in the history of this firm. Exactly, Donovan said, leaning against his desk. And their corporate proxy specifically requested our hungriest, most aggressive senior associate to lead the ground operation. I am assigning you as the lead counsel on the Nexus Health account. You finalize this transition smoothly. Jamal. And that empty managing partner chair is officially yours. No more waiting. No more office politics. You will be at the absolute top of the food chain. Pure, blinding euphoria rushed through Jamal's veins. He had done it. He had finally secured the ultimate leverage. Thank you. Donovan, I will not let you down. I have been preparing for a high-stakes play exactly like this my entire career. Donovan took another sip of his drink. There is one catch. Washington. The CEO of Nexus Health is a ghost. He operates entirely through a labyrinth of shell companies, proxy boards, and offshore accounts. Nobody in the industry knows his real name or what he looks like, but our corporate intelligence suggests he is currently in Manhattan this weekend. If you can somehow manage to track him down, shake his hand, and secure him as a permanent direct client for this firm, you will not just be a managing partner. You will be a legend. Jamal's mind immediately raced to the extravagant gala he was hosting that very night. An anonymous billionaire landlord. An elusive billionaire CEO. Manhattan was a playground for the ultra-rich, and Jamal firmly believed he held the golden ticket. Actually, Donovan Jamal said, smoothing his tie with practiced arrogance, I am hosting a highly exclusive charity gala tonight at a private triplex penthouse on Billionaires Row. We have the absolute elite of the city attending. If the Nexus CEO is in Manhattan, mingling with the upper echelon, there is a very high probability he will hear about my event. You should attend. When I find him, I will introduce you personally. Donovan raised an eyebrow. Genuinely impressed. Billionaires wrote, You truly are playing in the big leagues now. Jamal, I will absolutely be there. Secure this CEO and the firm is yours. Jamal walked back to his office, feeling like a conquering king. He immediately pulled out his phone and called Olivia. She answered on the first ring, her voice frantic over the background noise of caterers shouting instructions. Jamal. I am dealing with the florist, Olivia snapped. The imported orchids are the wrong shade of white. Tell me this is important. It is the most important call of our lives. Jamal replied, his voice dripping with pure arrogance. I just got handed the Nexus Health acquisition contract. It is a $50 million retainer. Donovan practically handed me the managing partner title. Tonight is no longer just about showing off your clinic or impressing your father's friends. We are hunting a ghost. The CEO of Nexus is in the city, and if he shows up to our gala, I am going to lock him down as my personal client. Olivia gasped completely, forgetting about the floral arrangements. Jamal, that is incredible. My father has been praying the Nexus buyout goes through to save his hospital. If you control the legal restructuring, you basically hold my father's pension in your hands. We are going to rule this family. We are going to rule this city, Jamal corrected her, his ego expanding to fill the entire room. Make sure the security downstairs treats every VIP like royalty. I do not care what it costs. Tonight has to be absolutely flawless. Jamal hung up the phone and sat at his desk, pulling up the digital legal contract. Nexus Health had sent over. He quickly scrolled through the hundreds of pages of complex corporate jargon. He saw the signatures of the holding company proxies. He saw the massive transfer amounts. But in his blinding rush of hubris, he completely glossed over Clause 9. If Jamal had slowed down, if his ego had not completely clouded his legal judgment, he would have noticed the highly unusual termination stipulation hidden deep within the fine print. Clause 9 explicitly stated that the anonymous founder and chief executive officer of Nexus Health retained the unilateral, unquestionable right to immediately terminate the legal counsel without notice, without cause, and without severance should the designated associate fail to meet his personal ethical standards. Jamal did not see the trap. He only saw the massive dollar signs. He eagerly applied his digital signature to the bottom of the document, legally binding himself and his firm to the absolute authority of the unseen CEO, miles away. Sitting in my meticulously tailored tuxedo inside the penthouse they were currently bankrupting themselves to rent, my secure tablet chimed. A notification flashed across the dark screen. The legal agreement had been signed and countersigned. Jamal Washington was now officially under my direct corporate control. The sheer devastating irony was almost intoxicating. The man who had mocked my poverty, who had laughed as I was thrown into the freezing snow, had just gleefully signed a contract, handing me the power to destroy his entire career with a single sentence. The board was set. The players were blind. The gala was about to begin. 3 floors below my silent sanctuary. The lower level of the triplex penthouse was a hive of frantic, high-priced activity. Olivia stood in the center of the massive open-concept living area, her voice echoing sharply against the imported Italian marble walls. Dressed in a shimmering custom-fitted silver gown that clung tightly to her frame, she clutched a silver clipboard like a weapon. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at a team of terrified florists who were frantically assembling a massive archway of imported white roses and rare orchids. "Make them tighter!" Olivia snapped, her voice shrill with mounting panic. "I paid $75,000 for these floral arrangements, and they currently look like cheap supermarket weeds. The managing partners of my husband's law firm will be walking through those heavy brass doors in less than an hour. Fix it immediately, or you will not see a single dime of your final payment." The head florist nodded quickly, rushing to comply with her demands. Olivia took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The financial pressure was completely crushing her. Every single detail of this extravagant evening had been purchased on high-interest credit. She had secretly taken out a massive second mortgage on their Tribeca condo just to cover the exorbitant catering costs. Her boutique dermatology clinic was weeks away from missing payroll entirely. But she firmly believed this party would save her. She just needed the elite attendees to see her standing in this $50 million property. She needed them to assume she naturally belonged to the billionaire class. The private elevator doors chimed and Jamal strode into the room. He wore a midnight blue velvet dinner jacket, his posture rigid with arrogant tension. He immediately began barking harsh orders at the waitstaff, dismissing a young server for carrying a silver tray at the wrong angle. Jamal walked over to Olivia and wrapped an arm around her waist, surveying the breathtaking panoramic view of Central Park, spreading out below them. "This is it, Liv," Jamal said, his eyes practically gleaming with raw greed. This venue is absolutely flawless. I just spoke with Donovan. The entire senior partnership is coming tonight. We hold the absolute key to the Nexus Health acquisition. If we play this right, I will be named managing partner by Monday morning. We will never have to worry about your father cutting off the clinic funding ever again. Olivia leaned into him, a predatory smile forming on her lips. We are going to own Manhattan Society after tonight. Jamal. This space screams generational wealth. Everyone will automatically assume we have secured a private network of foreign billionaires. Jamal adjusted his heavy diamond cufflinks. Speaking of billionaires, keep your eyes open for anyone who looks like they run a tech empire. The CEO of Nexus Health is in the city. He is a ghost. But Donovan thinks he might make an appearance if he hears about a gala at this exclusive address. If I can corner him and shake his hand, I can secure him as my personal client. I will be completely untouchable. As they stood there feeding each other's delusions of grandeur, the elevator chimed again. Richard and Patricia stepped out into the grand foyer. My mother was draped in a heavy emerald silk dress, her neck adorned with a thick diamond collar that she had likely forced my father to purchase on credit years ago. She immediately adopted her practiced haughty sneer, aggressively examining the soaring glass ceilings and the massive infinity pool visible through the terrace doors. Well, Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively. It is a bit modern for my taste, but I suppose it will do for a charity event. Have you ensured the caterers know not to serve the cheap champagne to the hospital board members? Olivia rolled her eyes, but nodded obediently. Yes, Mom. The vintage bottles are reserved exclusively for the VIP tables. Richard did not say a single word about the decor. He was sweating profusely beneath his stiff tuxedo collar. His face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he obsessively checked his mobile phone for incoming emails. The Street, Jude Medical Consortium Board of Directors, had finalized the buyout paperwork that morning. But the new parent company had instituted a complete communications blackout. Richard had absolutely no idea if he still had a job. The uncertainty was eating him alive. He walked over to a temporary bar and poured himself a heavy glass of bourbon, downing it in one swift motion. Richard, calm down, Patricia hissed, grabbing his arm and digging her manicured nails into his sleeve. You are sweating. You look desperate. You need to project absolute confidence tonight. We are at the apex of the social ladder. Act like it. I am trying, Patricia Richards snapped, keeping his voice low so the hired staff would not hear their panic. You do not understand the extreme pressure I am under right now. Vanguard Medical Holdings absorbed the hospital's debt, but they have not released the new executive restructuring plan. I have to find the Nexus CEO tonight. I have to convince him that my leadership is vital to the new brand, but they have not released the new executive restructuring plan. I have to find the Nexus CEO tonight. I have to convince him that my leadership is vital to the new brand. If I lose my position as chief medical officer, we lose everything. We will not even be able to afford the country club dues next month. Jamal walked over, clapping his father-in-law on the shoulder with fake reassurance. Relax. Richard, I am the lead counsel on the Nexus acquisition now. I hold the keys to the castle. Once I find this phantom CEO, I will make sure your executive package is fully protected. We are keeping all the power strictly in the family. Richard let out a long, shaky breath, clinging to Jamal's arrogant promise like a life raft. You are right, Jamal. We just need to control the narrative. Tonight is about showing undeniable power. Patricia smiled, finally relaxing her tight grip on Richard's arm. Exactly. This night is a triumph. It is a true testament to what this family can achieve when we focus on excellence. She paused, a cruel, mocking light entering her eyes. Could you imagine if we had allowed Ethan to drag us down? Could you imagine him standing in a place like this, mumbling about his little computer programs in a cheap thrift store suit. He would have been a total embarrassment to us all. Olivia laughed a sharp, ugly sound that echoed harshly off the marble walls. Thank God Dad threw him out. Can you imagine the senior partners meeting a medical school dropout? We would be an absolute laughingstock. Throwing him into that blizzard was the best executive decision you ever made. Dad. Richard stood a little taller, visibly inflating at his daughter's praise. The bourbon was beginning to study his frayed nerves. I did what was strictly necessary to protect the integrity of our family name. Weakness cannot be tolerated. We cut the dead weight and look at where we are now. The four of them stood in a tight circle in the center of the massive room, raising their crystal glasses in a unified toast to their own perceived brilliance. They felt absolutely invincible. They firmly believed their ruthless social climbing and financial manipulation had secured their place at the very top of the world. They were entirely oblivious to the fact that they were standing inside a $50 million cage. They had absolutely no idea that the dead weight they had so proudly discarded was currently sitting 3 floors right above their heads, putting on a $25,000 tuxedo and preparing to drop the sky directly on top of them. At exactly 8 o'clock, the heavy brass doors of the private lobby elevators began to slide open in a synchronized rhythmic sequence. The first wave of Manhattan's absolute elite spilled into the massive living space, bringing with them the sharp scent of expensive cologne, rare perfumes, and the crisp winter air. Women in cascading silk gowns and men in impeccably tailored tuxedos handed their heavy coats to the waiting staff. The string quartet, positioned elegantly on the floating glass balcony, swelled their music to fill the cavernous room. Olivia stood near the grand entryway, playing the role of the benevolent queen perfectly. She kissed cheeks, accepted lavish compliments on the breathtaking real estate, and artfully dodged any direct questions about how she managed to secure a property that was famously off-limits to the public. She dropped vague hints about anonymous foreign benefactors and exclusive private networks, watching with deep satisfaction as her high society rivals burned with undisguised envy. She even pointed to a massive abstract painting hanging on the far wall, confidently lying to a group of socialites about how she had personally helped the owner curate his collection. Across the room, Jamal was executing his own calculated social performance. He spotted Donovan Croft, the most ruthless senior partner at his law firm, stepping out of the elevator. Donovan was flanked by 3 other executive partners, all of them men who possessed the power to crown Jamal the next managing partner. Jamal immediately abandoned his conversation with a minor city politician and made a direct beeline for his bosses. Donovan gentlemen welcomed Jamal greeted them, flashing his brilliant, perfectly practiced smile. He gestured expansively toward the towering glass walls showcasing the glittering expanse of Central Park. I am thrilled you could make it tonight. Please enjoy the vintage champagne. Donovan took a slow, sweeping look around the opulent space, clearly impressed despite his usual cynical nature. I have to admit. Washington. When you said you secured a property on Billionaires Row, I assumed you meant a cramped event space on a lower floor. This is a fortress of serious, untouchable wealth. How exactly did you pull this off? It requires knowing how to speak the language of power, Jamal replied smoothly, his ego inflating to dangerous proportions. The owner is highly elusive, but he understands the value of associating his property with the right kind of people. When he heard my firm was handling the Nexus Health acquisition, he practically handed me the keys. It was a blatant, fabricated lie. But Jamal delivered it with such absolute conviction that the senior partners nodded in silent approval. Speaking of Nexus Health, another partner chimed in, swirling his dark liquor. Have you managed to track down the CEO yet? The ink on the hospital acquisition is dry, but the man remains a complete ghost. If we do not secure him as a permanent client tonight, this entire $50 million contract is just a temporary victory. I have eyes on every single entrance, Jamal assured them, his voice brimming with false certainty. If the CEO of Nexus steps foot in this building, I will have him signing a permanent retainer before he even reaches the bar. I hold the ultimate leverage tonight. While Jamal was busy inflating his own myth to his superiors, my father was rapidly descending into a state of sheer unadulterated panic. Richard Vance, the supposedly infallible chief medical officer, was pacing the perimeter of the room like a trapped animal. He was sweating straight through his tailored shirt. He ignored the lavish food, the expensive drinks, and the elite guests he usually spent hours attempting to impress. Instead, Richard was aggressively hunting for a ghost. He darted between clusters of guests, his eyes moving wildly, scanning name tags and faces. He was desperately searching for anyone who looked like a powerful tech executive. He approached a group of young, wealthy venture capitalists standing near the infinity pool. "Excuse me, gentlemen." Richard interrupted loudly, his voice tight with anxiety. "I am Dr. Richard Vance, Chief Medical Officer at St. Jude. I am looking for the Chief Executive of Nexus Health. Have any of you seen him? I was told he would be attending tonight." The investors looked at him with a mixture of confusion and mild annoyance, brushing him off and returning to their conversation. Richard gritted his teeth and moved to the next group, his desperation becoming increasingly visible. Patricia caught up to him near an extravagant ice sculpture, grabbing him firmly by the elbow and yanking him behind a massive floral arrangement. "Richard, you are acting like a lunatic," Patricia hissed, her face flushed with extreme embarrassment. "You are practically accosting these people. You look incredibly weak. You are ruining our image." "I do not care about the image right now, Patricia," Richard snapped back, his voice shaking with absolute terror. "You do not understand what is happening. The hospital board locked me out of my executive email account an hour ago. The security clearance on my digital keycard has been revoked entirely. Vanguard Medical Holdings has officially taken over and they are freezing out the senior staff. If I do not find the CEO of Nexus tonight and convince him that I am vital to this transition, I am finished. My career is over. We will be bankrupt by next month." Patricia's haughty demeanor finally cracked completely. The color drained from her heavily contoured face. "Locked you out, Richard. What are you saying?" Jamal promised he had this under control. Jamal is an arrogant fool who does not understand corporate slaughter, Richard growled, running a trembling hand over his face. "This new CEO is cleaning house. He is executing a complete purge. I need to find him and prove my worth before he permanently terminates my contract." "Then find him," Patricia demanded, her voice dropping into a harsh, panicked whisper. "Do whatever it takes. Richard, beg him if you have to. We cannot lose our lifestyle. I will not be humiliated in front of these people." Richard nodded frantically, adjusting his bow tie with sweaty fingers before plunging back into the crowded room. He resumed his desperate hunt, his eyes wide and frantic, completely oblivious to the bitter irony of his situation. The man who had spent his entire life demanding absolute submission from everyone around him was now practically hyperventilating, entirely prepared to drop to his knees and beg a nameless, faceless tech billionaire for his very survival. The pressure in the room was reaching a critical explosive threshold. The music played on smoothly. The champagne continued to flow endlessly. The wealthy guests laughed and clinked their crystal glasses, completely unaware that the floor beneath their feet was a perfectly engineered stage designed for a public execution. They were all playing their parts flawlessly in the tragedy I had written for them. Orbit 360 degrees. The camera circles the grand living space of the lower penthouse. The ambient chatter of the Manhattan elite blends seamlessly with the classical notes of the hired string quartet. Waiters with silver trays weave effortlessly through the dense crowd. The atmosphere is thick with expensive perfume and the intoxicating scent of artificial power. Suddenly, a sharp, distinct chime cuts directly through the surrounding noise. It is not the service elevator. It is not the guest elevator. It is the heavy brass doors of the private owner elevator. The specific entrance explicitly cordoned off by velvet ropes and two hulking security guards. The exact elevator everyone was strictly forbidden from even approaching. The string quartet falters, the chist missing a note as heads begin to turn. The low hum of conversation dies out in a wave. Every single person in the room shifts their attention toward the glowing golden lights of the private entry bank. Donovan Croft stops mid-sentence, his scotch glass frozen in his hand. Jamal stands a little taller, visibly bracing himself to enthusiastically greet whatever reclusive billionaire is about to step out. Richard pauses his frantic networking, his desperate eyes locking onto the brass doors with a sudden flare of absolute hope. He truly believes his corporate savior has finally arrived. Olivia touches her heavy diamond necklace, practicing a flawless, welcoming smile designed to enchant the wealthiest man in the room. The heavy brass doors slide open with a deep, satisfying metallic hum macro lens. The camera focuses tightly on a polished pair of $5,000 Oxford shoes, stepping purposefully onto the imported Italian marble floor. The camera slowly pans up, revealing the impeccable razor-sharp lines of a $25,000 custom-tailored Tom Ford tuxedo. The midnight black fabric absorbs the warm light of the room, exuding a quiet, terrifying aura of absolute authority. A vintage PC Philippe Nautilus watch gleams subtly on the left wrist, a silent testament to untouchable generational wealth. The camera reveals my face. I stand in the threshold, my posture completely relaxed, but undeniably dominant. I do not look like the exhausted, starving medical school dropout they threw into a raging blizzard exactly 3 weeks ago. I look like the man who owns the sky above them, for exactly 5 agonizing seconds. The silence in the room is absolute. The shock is a physical entity, heavy and suffocating. Olivia drops her champagne flute. The delicate crystal shatters violently against the marble floor, the crash echoing like a gunshot in the dead quiet room. Her practiced enchanting smile morphs instantly into an ugly mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Jamal takes a staggering step backward. His arrogant swagger vanishes, completely replaced by sheer confusion. His velvet dinner jacket suddenly looks like a cheap, poorly made costume next to my bespoke armor. Richard turns the color of chalk. The blood completely drains from his face, leaving him looking ancient and terrified. He bumps blindly into a passing waiter, nearly knocking over a tray of expensive appetizers. Ethan. He breathes the single word, escaping his pale lips in a ragged gasp, completely still. The camera locks firmly onto my face. I do not flinch. I do not smile. I simply scan the room, letting the heavy weight of my physical presence crush the remaining oxygen out of their lungs. Then the toxic, deeply ingrained conditioning forcefully reasserts itself. The sheer blinding arrogance of my family overrides their shock. They simply cannot comprehend a reality where I hold power, so their brains immediately construct a comfortable narrative, where I am still the pathetic failure they can easily step on. Richard recovers his voice first. His face rapidly shifts from pale terror to a mottled, furious purple. He marches aggressively across the polished marble floor, closing the distance between us with heavy, angry strides. He points a trembling finger directly at my chest. "What the hell are you doing here?" Richard hisses. He keeps his voice low, desperately trying to avoid a full public scene, but his tone vibrates with pure malice. "How did you get past the lobby security? Did you follow us here? You pathetic, desperate dropout. Did you sneak in through the service entrance just to embarrass us in front of my board members?" Patricia rushes over her emerald silk dress, rustling loudly. She grabs Richard by the arm, her eyes darting frantically around the room at the hundreds of staring guests. "Ethan, you need to leave right this second," she demands, her voice shrill and trembling with rage. "You are ruining Olivia's magnificent night. Have you absolutely no shame you stalked us to this event to beg for money? Did not you? This is exactly why your father threw you out. You are a disgusting parasite." Olivia steps forward, kicking a shard of broken crystal out of her way. Her face is twisted in a vicious sneer. "Security," she yells, snapping her fingers wildly toward the nearest guard. "Grab this man and throw him out. He is a trespasser. He is my deranged brother who has been stalking my family. Get him out of my sight before I call the police." Jamal quickly strides up, physically placing himself between me and the crowd, his corporate lawyer persona fully activated. He puffs out his chest, attempting to use his size to intimidate me. "Listen to me very carefully. Ethan." Jamal snarls, looking me up and down with intense disgust. "I do not know whose tuxedo you rented or which caterer let you slip through the door, but you are officially trespassing on a highly exclusive property. I rented this venue. If you do not turn around and walk back into that elevator right now, I will personally have you arrested for criminal trespassing and harassment. I will ruin whatever pathetic life you have left." Arc shot. The camera sweeps slowly around the tight circle of my family. They are practically foaming at the mouth, hurling their gaslighting and verbal abuse with practiced ease. They are entirely convinced they have the upper hand. They think they are squashing a bug. I stand perfectly still, letting their vicious words wash over me. I do not argue. I do not raise my voice. I look at Jamal, then at Olivia, then at my mother, and finally at my father. I am waiting for the exact moment they realize the trap has securely locked around their ankles. I am waiting for the exact moment they realize the trap has securely locked around their ankles. The silence in the room is absolute. A waiter walks past our tense circle carrying a silver tray of vintage champagne. I casually reach out and take a delicate crystal flute. I take a slow, deliberate sip, my eyes never leaving Jamal. The champagne is crisp and perfectly chilled. I bought the entire case myself last week. "Are you deaf?" Jamal barks, his voice echoing over the quiet murmurs of the elite crowd. "I said you need to leave before I have you thrown out in handcuffs. You are a massive liability." "Ethan, I am a senior corporate attorney. I have the entire New York Police Department on speed dial, and I know exactly how to file a restraining order so fast your head will spin right off your neck." Jamal points a rigid finger toward the heavy brass elevator doors. He is performing for his bosses now. I can see Donovan Croft, the ruthless senior partner at Jamal's law firm, watching the altercation from a few yards away. Jamal wants to prove he is the ultimate alpha male. He wants to show the senior partners that he can handle a security threat with absolute merciless efficiency. He wants to project unwavering power over me. I rented this entire floor. Jamal continues puffing out his chest. "I signed a legally binding contract with the holding company that owns this building. I am the authorized host of this charity gala. You have zero legal right to step foot on this Italian marble. You are committing criminal trespass harassment and disturbing the peace. I will drag you through the court system until you cannot even afford a cardboard box in Queens." I just smile. It is a small, cold smile that makes Jamal falter for a fraction of a second in front of everyone. "You are going to sue me, Jamal?" I ask quietly. "On what precise legal grounds that my tailored tuxedo is noticeably nicer than yours?" Olivia lets out a loud theatrical gasp. She steps forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with her husband. "You are delusional. Ethan," she spits, "look at yourself. You probably spent your entire life savings just to rent that suit so you could sneak in here and pretend you belong in our world. You are a total fraud. You are a medical school dropout who could not hack the real pressure. Now you are crashing my party because you want a handout. Well, you are not getting a single penny from us today or ever." My father cannot contain his explosive rage any longer. The veins in his neck are visibly bulging against his stiff white collar. He sees his wealthy colleagues watching the dramatic scene unfold, and his fragile ego is shattering under the perceived humiliation. He turns aggressively toward the perimeter of the room, raising his arm to frantically signal the building staff. "Security!" Richard roars, his voice carrying an undeniable tone of absolute entitlement. Where the hell is the property manager? I demand assistance immediately. The crowd of billionaires, surgeons, and corporate titans, parts like the Red Sea. The property manager, a tall, imposing man, strides purposefully toward our group. He is flanked by two massive security guards in dark suits. My family watches them approach with smug, victorious expressions. They firmly believe the cavalry has finally arrived to drag the trash out to the street. It is about time, Patricia scoffs, clutching her emerald silk dress. This man is a dangerous stalker. He has been harassing our family for years. He snuck into the building to ruin our charity event. Please remove him from the premises forcefully if you must. Do whatever it takes to get him out. Richard steps in front of the property manager, utilizing his physical height to assert immediate dominance. Listen to me very carefully, Richard commands, pointing sharply at me. I am Dr. Richard Vance. I am the Chief Medical Officer at St. Jude Medical Consortium. My son-in-law here paid a premium rate to rent this venue tonight. We expect a flawless, highly secure environment. This individual is an estranged relative with severe psychological issues. He is a college dropout who refuses to work for a living. I want him escorted out of this building, thrown onto the pavement, and permanently banned from ever entering the lobby again. Jamal nods vigorously in agreement, crossing his arms over his velvet dinner jacket. If he resists, I want the authorities called immediately. I will personally press charges on behalf of my family. We will not tolerate this blatant security breach. I expect a partial refund for this catastrophic interruption to our evening. I take another slow sip of my champagne. The sheer audacity of their demands is genuinely entertaining to watch. They are standing in the very center of my home, drinking my imported wine, breathing my temperature-controlled air, and demanding that my own employees throw me out onto the street. They are so deeply entrenched in their delusions of grandeur that they cannot even read the subtle body language of the security team. The security guards do not move toward me. They stand perfectly still, their hands clasped firmly behind their backs, their eyes fixed straight ahead in absolute silence. Jamal notices the hesitation. He steps dangerously close to me, aggressively invading my personal space. He tries to use his height to physically intimidate me, staring down with a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. You really thought you could pull this off, Jamal sneers softly just for me to hear. You thought you could crash my coronation and make me look weak. You are nothing. Ethan, you will always be nothing. You are a pathetic loser who could not make it in the real world. Tomorrow morning, I am filing an injunction against you. I will make sure you are tied up in litigation for the rest of your miserable life. Now, walk back into that elevator before I physically throw you in there myself. My father steps up right beside Jamal, completing the imposing wall of intimidation. Get out. Ethan, Richard growls, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. You are a permanent stain on my legacy. I told you 3 weeks ago to get out and stay out. You are completely dead to me. Walk away now and save yourself the final humiliation of being dragged out by the collar. The tension in the room reaches an absolute breaking point. The elite guests are watching with bated breath, entirely captivated by the brutal family warfare unfolding before them. Donovan Croft steps closer, his eyes narrowed, observing Jamal's handling of the situation. Olivia smirks, fully expecting me to drop my head in shame and scurry away like a beaten dog. Patricia crosses her arms, looking at me as if I am an infectious disease that needs to be scrubbed from the floor immediately. I hold my champagne glass elegantly. I look my father directly in the eyes. I look at Jamal's sweating forehead. I look at Olivia's arrogant sneer. I let the heavy silence stretch for a few more agonizing seconds, ensuring that every single person in the room is paying absolute attention to what is about to happen next. Are you quite finished? Jamal, I asked calmly, my voice slicing through the heavy air with chilling precision. Because for a senior corporate attorney, your understanding of property law is deeply embarrassing. It is time for a very painful reality check to begin right now. I look directly at my family, letting the silence stretch, savoring their arrogant ignorance. I nod at the property manager. Jamal notices and lets out a barking laugh. He points at me. Are you trying to give orders to the building staff now? Ethan Jamal sneer. You are unhinged. This is a private event. I paid the premium fee. I signed the agreement. Security, remove this trespasser now. Do your jobs before I sue this company. The property manager steps forward. He bypasses Jamal entirely. Walking past my father, he stops in front of me. He clasps his hands behind his back and bows deeply from the waist. Good evening, Mr. Vance, the property manager says. His voice booms over the soft classical music. Welcome home, sir. I apologize for the noise on the lower level tonight. We can have these guests cleared out in 5 minutes if they are disturbing your peace. The entire room seems to stop breathing. The air becomes instantly devoid of oxygen. Jamal stares at the property manager, his mouth open. He blinks, unable to process the words he just heard. What did you just say? Jamal stammers, his arrogant lawyer persona shattering into a million pieces. Welcome home. What kind of sick joke is this? I am the host of this gala. I rented this venue from the foreign investor. Olivia pushes past her husband, glaring at the manager. You are going to be fired by tomorrow morning. Olivia screams, losing her high society grace. Do you have any idea who we are? We paid a fortune to rent this space. You work for us tonight. Get him out of here. The property manager does not even look at my sister. Madam, the manager replies with icy detachment. I work exclusively for the owner of this building, and the owner of this building is standing right in front of you. I reach into the inner breast pocket of my custom Tom Ford tuxedo and slowly pull out a folded piece of heavy premium legal paper. I take my time as I slowly unfold it, smoothing out the sharp creases and hold it up so the bright overhead lights illuminate the dense black text. You see, Jamal. I begin, my voice entirely steady. As a supposedly brilliant corporate attorney, you really should read the fine print before signing a binding document, especially when you are recklessly throwing your entire life savings at a venue you cannot actually afford. I step much closer to Jamal. You rented this exclusive space from a holding company called Horizon Assets LLC. I explained, watching the color drain completely out of Jamal's face. You foolishly assumed it was an anonymous foreign billionaire. You blindly assumed you were tricking your way into an elite social circle. You practically begged my real estate broker to let you borrow this floor for just one night to impress your bosses. My father steps forward, hands shaking violently. He looks from the contract to my face, eyes wide with terrifying understanding. Ethan, what is this? My father whispers, his voice stripped of its roar. What holding company Horizon Assets LLC is a subsidiary of my corporation? I say, projecting my voice so the entire crowd of elites can hear every single word. I bought this penthouse 3 weeks ago. I paid $50 million in cash for it. I was the one who approved your rental application yesterday morning. I was the one who waived the security deposit in exchange for a cash premium because I knew you were draining your bank accounts to pay for it. I take one final step forward, invading the exact space Jamal tried to command moments before. I look directly into his terrified eyes, then shift my gaze to Olivia, my mother, and finally my father. You are standing in my house, I proudly declare to them. The words hit them with the concussive force of a freight train. Olivia actually stumbles backward, her high designer heels catching on the cold marble floor. She covers her mouth with both shaking hands, her wide eyes welling with hot tears of pure, unadulterated humiliation. The illusion of her flawless wealth has been violently ripped away in front of her most important clients and rivals. My mother, Patricia. clutches her chest tightly as if she is having a genuine heart attack. She looks wildly around the large room at the staring faces of the Manhattan elite. The people she spent decades trying to impress are now watching her family get utterly dismantled by the sun she threw into a blizzard. Jamal tries to salvage his shattered ego. He points a shaky finger at me, his legal mind desperately searching for a loophole. This is fraud. Jamal sputters sweat dripping down his forehead. You used a shell company to deceive us. That violates the implied covenant of good faith. I will sue you for deceptive business practices. I will void this contract. I let out a low, cold laugh that instantly silences his pathetic legal posturing. Sue me. Jamal, I ask, tilting my head. You signed a commercial lease agreement that clearly states the property owner retains absolute access to all floors at all times. There is zero deception. You just failed to do basic due diligence on your landlord. You were so blinded by your own desperate greed to secure this location that you handed your money to a ghost without asking a single question. I fold the contract, slipping it into my pocket. The manager steps beside me, flanked by security guards. They are no longer waiting for orders. They are preparing to execute mine. The first layer of my trap has crushed their fake social standing. They stand in my fortress, exposed as desperate frauds who rented space to fake their success. But I am not done yet. The professional execution is just beginning right now. Watch. The crowd remains absolutely paralyzed, processing the sheer magnitude of my revelation. Jamal is breathing heavily, his chest heaving under his velvet jacket as his brain frantically tries to calculate a way out of his humiliation. He looks around, desperate for an ally. His eyes land on the group of senior partners from his law firm, the men he invited to witness his glorious ascent to power. He expects them to rally behind him to use their immense legal weight to crush me. Instead, a tall, imposing man steps forward from the edge of the crowd. It is Donovan Croft, the most ruthless senior partner at Harrison Hayes and Croft. Donovan is not looking at Jamal with solidarity. He is staring directly at me, his sharp eyes widening in sudden, terrifying recognition. Donovan has spent decades swimming in the deepest waters of corporate Manhattan. He knows how to identify the apex predator in the room. He looks at my custom tuxedo at the vintage watch on my wrist, and then his gaze locks onto my face. Donovan takes another step closer, completely ignoring Jamal. Mr. Vance. Donovan says, his voice carrying a tone of absolute, unquestionable reverence. It is a profound honor to finally meet you in person. We were informed that the chief executive officer of Nexus Health preferred to remain anonymous during the early stages of our partnership. Had I known you were the owner of this magnificent property, I would have paid my respects the moment I arrived. The massive room goes so quiet you could hear a pin drop on the marble floor. The surrounding guests who viewed Jamal as an untouchable titan now watch him shrink into a pathetic shadow of himself. Jamal freezes. He turns to his boss, a look of uncomprehending horror plastered across his face. Donovan. What are you doing? Jamal stammers, his voice cracking. Why are you calling him the CEO? This is Ethan. He is my wife's brother. He is a medical school dropout who codes in a basement. He is a nobody. Donovan turns slowly to look at Jamal. The senior partner's face is a mask of pure, unfiltered disgust. Shut your mouth, Washington Donovan growls, his voice slicing through the air like a razor. You arrogant fool. Do you have any idea who you are currently speaking to? I step forward, closing the distance between myself and my brother-in-law. I smile, savoring the absolute destruction of his fragile ego. Allow me to clarify the situation for him. Donovan, I say smoothly. Jamal. My holding company does not just own this building. Nexus Health is my corporation. I built it from the ground up. I am the sole founder and the chief executive officer. And as of 8 o'clock this morning, My company officially retained your law firm to handle the largest hospital acquisition in the history of the East Coast. That $50 million contract you have been bragging about all night. I am the one who signed it. I am the white whale you were hunting. Jamal staggers backward as if I just struck him in the chest. His eyes dart wildly from my face to Donovan's, desperately looking for someone to tell him this is an elaborate prank. But Donovan is nodding in solemn agreement, his posture rigidly respectful toward me. No, Jamal breathes, shaking his head frantically. No, that is impossible. You do not have that kind of capital. You are lying. You forged the corporate documents just to ruin my event. I reach into my jacket pocket once more. I pull out my phone and open the secure legal portal for Nexus Health. I tap the screen, bringing up the finalized retainer agreement between my corporation and Harrison Hayes and Croft. I hold the glowing screen up high so Jamal can clearly see his own digital signature at the very bottom of the document. You signed this contract just hours ago. Jamal, I remind him coldly, but in your desperate rush to secure your promotion, you failed to read the fine print. Does Clause 9 ring a bell? The clause that gives me the unilateral right to terminate my designated legal counsel without notice or cause if they fail to meet my ethical standards. Jamal's knees visibly buckle. He reaches out and grips the back of a nearby leather chair just to keep himself standing. I look directly at Donovan Croft. Donovan, when I hired your firm, I expected discretion, professionalism, and absolute integrity. Instead, your senior associate has spent the entire evening threatening me with false police reports and attempting to illegally evict me from my own property. He is a massive liability to my brand, and I will not allow my corporation to be represented by a man who operates with such staggering ineptitude and blind arrogance. Donovan does not hesitate for a single microcond. He turns his predatory gaze entirely onto Jamal, ready to sever the weak link to save his firm. Washington, you are officially removed from the Nexus Health account. Donovan barks his voice, echoing brutally across the silent room. You are completely stripped of your lead counsel status effective immediately. Furthermore, you will not be considered for the managing partner position at the upcoming board vote. In fact, considering your catastrophic lack of judgment and extreme unprofessionalism tonight, I suggest you clear out your desk by Monday morning. Your career at this firm is over. The execution is flawless. In the span of 3 minutes, Jamal has lost his multi-million-dollar contract, his guaranteed promotion, and his prestigious job. He is professionally ruined. He stands there in his velvet tuxedo, panting heavily, his eyes wide and completely vacant. He has been stripped of the very armor he used to abuse me. Olivia rushes to her husband's side, grabbing his arm tightly. Jamal, say something. She cries, her voice high and panicked. Tell them they cannot do this. Tell them you will sue the firm. But Jamal absolutely cannot speak. He is staring at the marble floor broken. The second layer of my trap has snapped shut, obliterating the golden child's arrogant husband. Now it is time for the final blow. I turn my eyes toward my father. Now it is time for the final blow. I turn my eyes toward my father. Richard Vance has just watched his golden son-in-law get professionally slaughtered in a matter of seconds. The terrifying reality of my absolute power is finally penetrating his thick skull. I can see the exact moment his arrogant superiority shatters and morphs into raw, frantic self-preservation. He realizes that the faceless corporate investment group he has been desperately chasing all night is standing right in front of him. The billionaire savior of his crumbling medical empire is the very son he so callously disowned. Richard takes a hesitant step forward. He forces his facial muscles to arrange themselves into a sickeningly fake expression of fatherly pride. He actually attempts a warm, welcoming smile. The sheer hypocrisy of the gesture makes my stomach turn. Ethan Richard says his voice completely devoid of its usual booming authority. It sounds tiny and incredibly desperate. My boy, I had absolutely no idea. This is an incredible accomplishment. You built Nexus Health. The hospital board told me we were being acquired by a visionary conglomerate, but I never could have imagined my own son was the genius behind the curtain. We have so much to discuss. We can merge our visions. With my medical expertise and your capital, we can rule the healthcare industry together. I stare at him. The crowd watches in stunned fascination as the great doctor gravels. There is no we. Richard, I say, my voice dropping to a glacial chill. And I am not your boy. You made that abundantly clear 8 years ago when you threw me out into a blizzard and told me I was a permanent stain on your legacy. Richard swallows hard sweat beading on his forehead. He reaches out a trembling hand, trying to bridge the massive gap between us. Ethan, please. Things were said in anger. I was just trying to push you to reach your full potential. Look at what you achieved. I am so incredibly proud of you. We are family. Nexus Health needs a strong, experienced chief medical officer to guide the transition at St. Jude. I am your best asset. I do not blink. I reach out to David, my head of security, who is holding a sleek black leather folder. I take the folder heavy with legal documents and let it drop onto a nearby marble table with a resounding thud. You are not an asset. Richard, I state firmly, stepping closer to the table. You are a catastrophic liability. I open the folder. The bright overhead lights illuminate the seal of St. Jude Medical Consortium alongside the bold logo of Vanguard Medical Holdings, my direct corporate subsidiary. Your hospital board did not just vote to approve the acquisition this morning, I announce, ensuring my voice carries to the listening ears of his wealthy peers. They surrendered entirely. They handed over absolute operational control to my corporation because your reckless vanity project nearly destroyed a century-old institution. You funneled $200 million into luxury VIP suites for your country club friends while ignoring fundamental patient care infrastructure. Your gross financial negligence triggered a massive wave of malpractice lawsuits that pushed the hospital to the very brink of insolvency. Patricia gasps, clutching her chest. Richard opens his mouth to defend himself, but no words come out. He is suffocating under the weight of his exposed failures. I tap the stack of papers. Vanguard Medical Holdings assumed all of your debt today, and as per clause 7.44 of the acquisition agreement, the incoming parent company retains the immediate unchallengeable right to terminate any senior executive if financial negligence is proven. We have compiled over 400 pages of hard evidence detailing your corruption. Richard's eyes dart wildly around the room. He sees the elite surgeons and politicians he has spent decades trying to impress. They are looking at him with sheer disgust. His infallible reputation is disintegrating right before his eyes. Ethan, you cannot do this, Richard begs his voice, breaking into a pathetic whine. My entire pension is tied to this hospital. My medical license could be reviewed. I am your father. You owe me some respect. I owe you absolutely nothing, I reply smoothly. You spent my entire life starving me of affection, demanding I fit into your rigid, arrogant mold when I needed a $10,000 loan to save my company. You tossed my business plan in the garbage and told me to bag groceries. You fully funded Olivia's failing clinic and handed Jamal a massive trust fund while deliberately trying to break me. You thought your money made you a god, but today, my money makes me the executioner. Patricia suddenly lunges forward, her emerald silk dress swishing wildly. She grabs my arm, her manicured nails digging into my jacket. Ethan, please, you cannot ruin us like this. She sobs, her haughty demeanor completely vanishing. She is crying, real tears now, terrified of losing her social standing. We will be laughing stocks. Where will we go? How will we live? I look down at her hand and brush it off my arm as if she is nothing but dust. You will live the exact same way you forced me to live. Patricia, you will figure it out without a safety net. You spent decades treating me like an embarrassing secret, lying to your elite friends tonight, that I was working overseas just to cover up the fact that you threw me away. You made your bed with your golden children. Now you get to lie in it. I pick up a single sheet of paper from the folder. It is printed on thick premium cardstock. The official termination notice. As the founder and chief executive officer of Nexus Health, I am officially exercising my executive authority. I declare, holding the paper up. Richard Vance, you are terminated from your position as Chief Medical Officer at St. Jude Medical Consortium, effective immediately. You are fired without severance. Your executive pension is frozen pending a full financial audit of your vanity expansion project. Your security clearance has already been revoked. Richard falls to his knees. The great untouchable surgeon literally drops to the marble floor in front of hundreds of people. His hands shake as he covers his face. A broken, defeated old man. Olivia is sobbing loudly against a pillar, watching her entire inheritance and social empire evaporate into thin air. Jamal stands frozen like a statue, completely dead inside. I step right into my father's personal space, looking down at his terrified, broken form. I lean in close, lowering my voice so only he and my mother can hear the final, devastating blow. 8 years ago, you stood in your lavish house and told me to get out and stay out. I whisper, delivering every word with surgical precision. You told me to pack my pathetic bag and never show my face again. You told me I was no longer your son. I step back, allowing the full weight of my power to crush the last remaining fragment of his ego. I raise my voice so the entire room can hear the final verdict. Now I am returning the favor. You are standing in my house. You are trespassing on my property. Get out and stay out. Richard, tomorrow morning you can go to the hospital and clean out your desk under the supervision of my security team. Until then, take your fake prestige. Take your bankrupt family and get out of my sight. The absolute finality of my words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, for a long, agonizing moment. The only sound in the massive $50 million penthouse was the ragged, wet breathing of my father kneeling on the imported Italian marble. No one spoke. No one moved. The string quartet had completely stopped playing their bows, frozen over their instruments. The elite crowd of Manhattan billionaires, high-powered surgeons, and ruthless corporate titans stood completely paralyzed. They were apex predators, individuals who thrived on power and capital. And they instantly recognized what had just occurred. They were witnessing a live corporate and social execution. Richard Vance, the man who had strutted through life believing he was untouchable, remained crumpled on the floor. He tried to speak his jaw, working frantically, but no sound emerged. The God complex that had defined his entire 62 years of existence was entirely shattered. His mind simply could not process the brutal reality that the son he had discarded like common garbage was the architect of his total destruction. He stared blindly at the polished floor, his shoulders shaking with the terrifying realization that he was now completely bankrupt, publicly disgraced, and professionally ruined. Patricia reached out with a trembling diamond-adorned hand. She looked desperately at the surrounding crowd, searching for a single sympathetic face among the elite socialites she had spent decades trying to impress. Her eyes locked onto a prominent hospital board member's wife, a woman Patricia considered a close friend. "Please," Patricia whispered, her voice cracking under the crushing weight of her humiliation. "Tell him he cannot do this to us." The socialite did not offer a hand. She did not offer a word of comfort. Instead, she took a deliberate, highly visible step backward, creating a clear physical boundary between herself and my mother. She coldly turned her head and looked away. That single movement triggered a chain reaction. The crowd of wealthy guests silently shifted. Stepping back, pulling away from my family as if they were suddenly highly contagious. In the ruthless hierarchy of Manhattan, high society, Proximity to failure is a fatal disease. My parents were no longer the wealthy, influential hosts of an exclusive charity gala. They were paras. They were a sinking ship, and the rats were fleeing with breathtaking speed. Patricia let out a strangled, pathetic sob. Her emerald silk dress suddenly looked absurdly out of place. The illusion of her grand superior life evaporated entirely. She realized with brutal clarity that these people had never been her actual friends. They only respected power, and all the power in the room currently belonged to me. The silence of the crowd was not just a lack of noise. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of pure judgment. Then the fragile transactional matrix of my family completely imploded. Olivia, realizing that her boutique clinic was dead and her social standing was eradicated, turned her ferocious panic onto her husband. The golden child facade dropped, revealing the vicious, desperate woman beneath. "You told me you secured this venue." Olivia screamed at Jamal, her voice shrill and echoing off the glass walls. Her heavy makeup was smeared from crying, ruining her pristine image. "You told me you had the Nexus contract locked down. You rented my brother's house with our last dollar. You ruined us," Jamal snapped. The polished, arrogant corporate lawyer persona vanished, replaced by the sheer panic of a man who had just lost everything he had ever worked for. He turned on Olivia, his face contorting with raw fury. "Do not you dare put this on me!" Jamal roared back at her, his voice booming through the silent room. "You are the one who demanded this gala. You drained our accounts for these ridiculous flowers and caterers just to show off to your fake friends. I lost my career because your father is an incompetent, corrupt fool who ran his hospital into the ground. You ungrateful bastard." Richard suddenly wheezed, struggling to his feet with Patricia's help. "I bought your career. I paid off your debts. I handed you clients. You bought a shield for your own massive ego." Jamal spat, adjusting his velvet jacket with shaking hands. "Your entire empire was built on fraud, Richard. And now I am going down with your sinking ship because I married into this pathetic, toxic family." They stood in the center of my magnificent living room, tearing each other to pieces. The conditional love they had always championed was instantly replaced by venom and blame the exact second their money disappeared. They had built their entire familial bond on a foundation of wealth, status, and mutual exploitation, without my father's bank account to artificially prop them up. There was absolutely nothing keeping them together. They despised one another. I watched the screaming match with a profound sense of closure. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to argue. I simply watched the toxic machine that had tortured me for years consume itself. "Enough," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it cut through their hysterical arguing instantly. The absolute authority in my tone forced them into silence. They looked at me panting, their faces flushed with rage and utter defeat. "David," I said, turning to my head of security. The property manager stepped forward in unison with two massive security guards clad in dark suits. "Escort these individuals off my property immediately. Ensure they leave nothing behind." And David utilized the service elevator. They are no longer permitted in the main lobby. The ultimate indignity washed over them. The service elevator. The transport reserved for garbage and freight. "You cannot do this," Patricia sobbed, clinging to my father's arm as the security guards advanced. "We are your family. Ethan, we are your blood." I looked directly into her terrified, tear-streaked face. My expression remained entirely impassive, carved from the same ice they had shown me in the blizzard 3 weeks ago. "Blood is a biological accident, Patricia," I stated coldly. "Family implies loyalty, support, and basic human decency. You proved to me exactly who you are when you left me to freeze in the snow while you drank champagne. I am just holding up a mirror. Now follow the guards." The security team closed in their broad shoulders, forming an impenetrable wall. Jamal tried to adjust his posture desperately, trying to salvage a microscopic shred of dignity, but his hands were shaking too badly. Olivia hid her face behind her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as she realized the hundreds of elite guests were watching her disgraceful exit. Richard looked like a hollow shell, his shoulders slumped, his eyes completely vacant. The crowd of billionaires and executives parted silently, creating a wide, humiliating path toward the back corridors of the penthouse. My family was forced to walk the gauntlet. They stumbled past the very people they had tried so desperately to impress, feeling the burning heat of absolute public rejection. Nobody offered a comforting word. Nobody looked them in the eye. I stood by the edge of the infinity pool, listening to the heavy footsteps of the security guards marching them away. I listened to the sound of the heavy service doors opening and closing. I listened to the mechanical hum of the freight elevator descending, taking my father, my mother, my sister, and her husband completely out of my life. When the doors finally clicked shut, a collective breath was released throughout the massive room. The toxic pressure that had infected the atmosphere was instantly purged. I turned back to face the crowd of elite Manhattan guests. They were looking at me with a mixture of profound awe and deep, undeniable respect. I had not just proven my wealth. I had demonstrated an absolute, terrifying command of power. Donovan Croft stepped forward, raising his glass of vintage champagne directly toward me. It was a silent, powerful gesture of submission and professional respect from one titan to another. I reached out and took a fresh glass from a passing waiter. I raised it in return, the crystal catching the bright light of the chandelier. I took a slow sip, feeling the incredible weight of my past finally lift from my shoulders. The war was over. I had won. The war was over. I had won. But the true devastation of my family did not end when the freight elevator doors closed that night. In fact, the absolute destruction of their lives was only just beginning. The corporate machinery I had set in motion was cold, highly efficient, and entirely merciless. By Monday morning, the reality of their new existence crashed down upon them with the force of an avalanche. Richard Vance arrived at St. Jude Medical Consortium at 6 o'clock in the morning. He swiped his gold-tier executive badge at the private parking garage entrance. The scanner flashed a harsh red light. Access denied. He tried his digital passcode. Invalid. When he angrily marched to the main lobby to demand an explanation from the front desk, he was met by two heavily armed security contractors wearing the dark blue uniform of Vanguard Medical Holdings. They did not address him as Dr. Vance. They handed him a single standard-issue cardboard box and escorted him to his corner office under the watchful eyes of the entire nursing staff. He had terrorized for a decade. He was given exactly 15 minutes to pack his personal items. His executive pension was frozen, pending a massive federal audit into his gross mismanagement of hospital funds. He walked out of the sliding glass doors holding a cheap box of pens and framed photographs, a completely disgraced man. Across the city, Jamal experienced a similarly brutal execution. He walked into the gleaming lobby of Harrison Hayes and Croft, desperately hoping that Donovan Croft would show some mercy. He thought his years of aggressive corporate litigation would buy him a second chance. He was catastrophically wrong. Donovan had already instructed the Human Resources Department to sever all ties. Jamal was met by a junior associate holding his termination paperwork. He was stripped of his senior counsel status. His corporate email was deleted, and his lucrative client roster was immediately redistributed. The law firm completely washed their hands of him to ensure their $50 million contract with Nexus Health remained perfectly intact. Jamal walked back onto the busy Manhattan pavement with absolutely nothing to his name except a mountain of high-interest debt. The financial contagion spread rapidly to Olivia. The moment my father's bank accounts were frozen by the auditors, the monthly wire transfers that sustained her vanity dermatology clinic instantly bounced. Her landlord in Soho issued a commercial eviction notice within 72 hours. The medical supply companies she had strung along for months finally called in their debts. Repo men arrived in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon to physically wheel out her $250,000 laser machines while a waiting room full of confused clients watched. Olivia tried to call her wealthy socialite friends, the same women who had sipped vintage champagne at the gala, desperately asking for a bridge loan. Every single one of them blocked her number, in the ruthless ecosystem of the Manhattan elite. Poverty is a highly infectious disease, and my sister had become patient zero. The collapse of their fake empire was absolute. Without Richard's massive salary, the mortgage payments on the sprawling Hamptons estate defaulted. Patricia was forced to frantically sell off her beloved diamond necklaces and designer handbags just to keep the lights on, while the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. They eventually had to abandon the $6 million property and move into a cramped, highly outdated apartment in a noisy borough. Jamal and Olivia suffered the same fate. Their luxury Tribeca condo was seized by creditors to cover the massive cash loans they had taken out to rent my penthouse. The stress of their mutual bankruptcy fractured their toxic marriage. They spent their days screaming at each other in a tiny rental unit, completely drowning in blame and bitter resentment. I watched it all happen from the quiet sanctuary of my $50 million penthouse. My private security team and financial analysts provided me with regular, detailed updates on their rapid descent into ruin. I did not have to lift another finger. I simply allowed the natural consequences of their own staggering arrogance to run their course. Then came the text messages, as the reality of their permanent exile set in their pride finally broke. My secure tablet began buzzing with pathetic, desperate communications. I sat on my leather sofa overlooking Central Park, reading the messages with a profound sense of detachment. The first came from my mother. "Ethan, please. Your father is having chest pains from the stress. We are losing the house. We have nothing left. I know we made mistakes, but we are your parents. Please just answer the phone. I am begging you." A week later, Jamal sent a message. "Look, Ethan, you won. You proved your point." The firm fired me and blacklisted my name. I cannot find work anywhere in the city. Olivia is falling apart. We are facing complete ruin. Just give us a small loan to keep us afloat until I find a new firm. You have hundreds of millions. A 100,000 is nothing to you. Be the bigger man. Olivia's messages were erratic, cycling rapidly between toxic rage and pathetic begging. "You ruined my life. I hope you are happy. You stole my clinic." Followed 2 days later by another text. "Ethan, please call me back. I am so sorry. I was just following Mom and Dad's lead. I never meant to hurt you. I am your little sister. Please do not leave me like this." And finally, an email from Richard. "Son, I failed you. My pride blinded me to your brilliance. I see now that you were always the strongest of us. I have lost my hospital, my reputation, and my legacy. I have nothing left but my family, and I have lost you, too. Please let me see you. Let me apologize face to face." I read every single word. I absorbed their desperation, their panic, and their sudden, entirely fake remorse. They were not sorry for how they had treated me for 8 years. They were not sorry for throwing me into a blizzard. They were only sorry that the bank accounts had run dry and the golden goose they had kicked out was now the only entity capable of saving them. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the warm ceramic against my palm. I felt no guilt. I felt no triumphant joy either. I simply felt an overwhelming, incredible quiet. The noise of their constant criticism, the heavy burden of their impossible expectations, and the toxic radiation of their conditional love had been entirely eradicated from my atmosphere. I swiped the notifications away, clearing my screen. I did not reply to a single message. I did not block their numbers either. I simply let their pleas sit in the digital void, completely ignored and entirely unanswered. Their words had absolutely no power over me anymore. The psychological grip they had held on my life for 3 decades was permanently severed. They were ghosts to me now, haunting the edges of a world they could no longer enter, completely still. The camera cuts from the cold blue light of the digital tablet back to the present day. We are back in the warmly lit living room high above the Manhattan skyline. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a steady, comforting glow, casting a rich amber light across the mahogany floor. I am sitting in the same deep leather armchair holding my ceramic coffee cup. The warmth of the mug radiates into my palms, grounding me in the reality of the safe. Quiet space I have built. Macro lens. The camera pushes in slowly on the silver photo frame resting on the side table. It is still turned face down. I reach out and trace my index finger along its polished metal edge. I do not flip it over. I have no desire to look at the frozen, staged smiles of a family that only existed for the cameras. Leaving it face down is not an act of anger anymore. It is an act of profound peace. It is the physical manifestation of a boundary that will never be crossed again. I take a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter, complex flavor. Success is a concept that gets drastically distorted when you are raised by people who worship status. For 33 years, I believed that success was a highly specific destination. I thought it was a medical degree, a corner office, or a perfectly tailored suit. I thought it was the absolute absence of failure. But that definition of success is a trap designed to keep you running on a treadmill powered by other people's expectations. Orbit 3608. The camera begins a slow, deliberate circle around my chair, capturing the vast, quiet elegance of the penthouse. The driving rain from the opening scene has finally stopped. Through the massive glass windows, the city of New York stretches out in pristine, silent clarity. True success is not a financial metric. It is not the $50 million price tag on this real estate, nor is it the billion-dollar valuation of Nexus Health. Those are just numbers on a screen. True success is the absolute freedom to define your own reality. It is the ability to walk away from a toxic environment without needing their permission or their closure. It is the quiet power of knowing that your worth is not determined by an arbitrary set of rules written by people who lack basic human empathy. My family believed that wealth was a shield that protected them from the consequences of their actions. They used their money as a weapon to demand compliance. But when you build your entire identity on the precarious foundation of public perception, you become incredibly fragile. The moment their financial leverage evaporated, their loyalty vanished with it. They turned on each other with the ferocity of starving wolves because they had absolutely nothing authentic holding them together. I set the coffee cup down next to the overturned frame. The contrast between my current life and the freezing queen's apartment is stark. But the most significant change is not the square footage or the zip code. The most significant change is the people I choose to let inside. When I was building my company, scrubbing those corporate floors and surviving on sheer willpower, I met people who actually understood the meaning of loyalty. I met other struggling developers who shared their limited resources. I met mentors who offered guidance without demanding a percentage of my soul in return. I built a team at Nexus Health composed of brilliant, resilient individuals who value innovation over ego. When Victor, my chief financial officer, worked through the night to structure the hospital buyout, he did not do it out of fear. He did it because he believed in our shared mission. When my head of acquisitions handed me that gold pen in the boardroom, she looked at me with genuine professional pride. We share dinners, we celebrate milestones, and we support each other through the inevitable crisis of running a massive conglomerate. They know the darkest parts of my journey, and they do not view those struggles as shameful secrets to be hidden from high society. They view them as the forged steel that holds our corporation together. That is what a real family does. They help you carry the weight when your arms are tired. A biological family is an accident of genetics. A chosen family is a deliberate act of mutual respect and unconditional support. Arc shot. The camera sweeps wide, framing me against the breathtaking backdrop of the illuminated city. I stand up from the leather armchair and walk slowly toward the glass. The reflection in the window shows a man who is entirely whole. We are conditioned by society to believe that cutting off toxic family members is a profound tragedy. People tell you that blood is thicker than water. They insist that you must forgive and forget because you only get one mother and one father. But forgiveness does not require a relationship. You can forgive someone for being broken while simultaneously refusing to allow their broken shards to cut you ever again. Setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-preservation. When you finally stop pouring your energy into a bottomless pit of familial expectation, you suddenly have the resources to build an empire. You realize that the energy you spent trying to earn unearned love can be redirected into your passions, your career, and your own healing. I look down at the streets below. The Maybach is parked safely in the subterranean garage. The corporate acquisition is finalized. The ghost of the medical school dropout has been permanently laid to rest. I did not just survive their abandonment. I used the bricks they threw at me to build a fortress they can never penetrate. Completely still, the camera locks onto my face one final time. I look directly into the lens, breaking the fourth wall with absolute sincerity. If you are watching this and you are currently suffocating under the weight of toxic family expectations, I need you to hear this truth. You are not required to set yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. You are allowed to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. Your unconventional path is not a failure, simply because they lack the vision to understand it. Do not wait for their approval. Do not wait for their apology. Build your life in the quiet dark. Hone your skills when no one is watching and trust your own instincts. The greatest revenge you can ever achieve is not destruction. It is massive, undeniable success followed by total, unapologetic silence. Thank you for listening to my story. Please share your own experiences with toxic boundaries in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and remember to always guard your peace fiercely. Good night from New York. The story of Ethan's journey from an exiled medical school dropout to a triumphant self-made billionaire offers a profoundly moving reflection on the true nature of success, resilience, and familial love. The most vital lesson to be extracted from this narrative is that our self-worth must never be tethered to the conditional approval of toxic relatives. For years, Ethan was starved of affection, financial support, and basic human dignity simply because he dared to step outside the rigid, status-obsessed box his parents had constructed. His experience illuminates a painful reality that some families view love not as a sanctuary of unconditional support, but as a cold transaction based entirely on prestige and social standing. When society repeatedly insists that blood is thicker than water, it often inadvertently traps individuals in a vicious cycle of emotional manipulation and gaslighting. Ethan's refusal to break under his father's arrogant demands and his family's sneering judgment highlights the absolute power of walking away. We learn that setting firm, uncompromising boundaries is never an act of cruelty. Rather, it is a necessary life-saving measure of self-preservation. Ethan built his technological empire in the quiet, freezing dark of a queen's apartment, actively converting the deep pain of abandonment into the unyielding fuel for his innovation. Ultimately, true success is not defined by a massive corporate acquisition or a $50 million penthouse on Billionaires Row. True success is the absolute freedom to define your own reality, to heal your psychological scars, and to surround yourself with a chosen family who supports you unconditionally. The ultimate victory over systemic abuse is not vindictive revenge, but thriving in total, unapologetic peace. Take a moment